My future son-in-law thought my ranch was his retirement fund. He thought my silence was weakness. But when my daughter pulled a crumpled note from her wedding bouquet that read, "Dad, help me," he learned exactly what happens when you corner a man with nothing left to lose. I did not just stop the wedding. I started a war. My name is Cornel Hayes. I am 72 years old, and I have spent my entire life working the soil of Texas. I am not a man of many words. I let my actions speak. But what happened last Saturday needs to be told. Before I tell you how I brought down a dynasty of liars, please tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that family is about loyalty, not about money. The Sterling estate was designed to make people like me feel small. It was a sprawling white mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. There was not a single weed, not a speck of dust, and definitely no place for an old cattle rancher in a tuxedo that was 20 years out of style. I tugged at my collar. It felt like a noose. I stood in the corner of the ballroom holding a glass of sparkling water that I did not want. I watched the guests filter in. They were the elite of the county. Doctors, lawyers, politicians. People who had soft hands and hard eyes. They looked at me with that polite curiosity reserved for zoo animals. I was the token guest, the father of the bride, the necessary inconvenience. My daughter Zola was upstairs getting ready. I had not been allowed to see her all morning. Patricia Sterling, the mother of the groom, had blocked the door to the bridal suite. She told me with a tight smile that Zola needed to focus. She said Zola was too emotional and seeing me would only upset her. I should have kicked the door down then, but I wanted Zola to be happy. I wanted to believe that Hunter Sterling was the man she said he was. I needed air. I needed to splash water on my face. I made my way to the restrooms down the hall. The marble floors echoed under my dress shoes. I pushed open the door to the men's room. It was empty, or so I thought. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap. The cold water felt good on my wrists. Then I heard a voice from the last stall. It was Hunter. He was on the phone. "Do not worry about the transfer," I heard Hunter say. His voice was low, but the acoustics in the bathroom were sharp. I froze. I turned off the tap. "Yes, I know the interest is piling up." Hunter continued. He sounded annoyed, arrogant. "Just give me 48 hours. As soon as we sign the certificate, I have legal standing. The old man is 72. He does not know a trust fund from a tractor." I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes narrowed. "Once we are married, I own 50% of her assets." Hunter laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound, and her assets include that 500-acre ranch. I already have a buyer lined up for the mineral rights. We will pave over that cow pasture and turn it into a gold mine. Just keep the creditors off my back until Monday. My hands clenched into fists on the countertop. My knuckles turned white. He was not marrying Zola. He was marrying my land. He was marrying a bailout for his debts. I heard the stall latch click. I did not wait. I slipped out of the bathroom and ducked into a supply closet across the hall just as Hunter walked out. I watched him through the crack in the door. He checked his hair in the hallway mirror. He adjusted his tie. He looked like the perfect gentleman. He looked like a viper. I stepped out after he left. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from a rage I had not felt since my days in the Marines. I needed to get to Zola. I needed to stop this. But the music started. The wedding march. I was too late to stop the procession. I had to take my place. I walked into the garden where the ceremony was being held. Hundreds of white chairs were arranged in perfect rows. Flowers were everywhere. It smelled like money. I took my seat in the front row. The guests stood up, and then I saw her. Zola walked down the aisle. She was beautiful. Her dress was silk and lace, costing more than I made in a good year. But her face was wrong. She was not smiling. She was pale. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She did not look like a bride. She looked like a prisoner walking to the gallows. She did not look at Hunter. She looked straight at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She was trying to tell me something. I stood up straighter. I locked eyes with her. I nodded slightly. "I am here," I tried to say without speaking. "I am right here." She reached the altar. Hunter stepped forward and took her hand. He flashed a dazzling smile at the crowd, then at her. He looked the picture of devotion. But I saw the way his fingers dug into her arm. It was not a caress. It was a grip. The officiant began to speak. He talked about love, about partnership, about two families becoming one. It made me sick. I watched Zola's hands. She was holding her bouquet so tightly the stems were snapping. "Do you, Hunter Sterling, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. "I do," Hunter said. His voice was smooth, confident. "Do you, Zola Hayes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Silence. The birds chirped in the trees. The guests shifted in their seats. Zola did not speak. She was trembling. I could see the lace of her veil shaking. Zola Hunter whispered, his smile straining. She turned to me. She ignored him. She ignored the priest. She ignored the 300 guests. She turned her body completely toward the front row where I sat. She reached into the center of her white rose bouquet. Her fingers fumbled for a second. Then she pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was crumpled, as if she had been hiding it there for hours. She extended her hand toward me. The guests gasped. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patricia Sterling stood up from the other side of the aisle. "What is she doing?" Patricia hissed. I did not hesitate. I stepped forward to the altar. I took the note from Zola's shaking hand. Hunter tried to intervene. "Zola, honey, this is not the time," he said through gritted teeth. He reached for the paper. I shoved his hand away. I unfolded the note. It was scrawled in black marker. The letters were shaky. "Dad helped me. He knows about Mom's debt. He says he will take the ranch if I don't say I do." The world stopped. The sound of the wind faded. The faces of the crowd blurred. All I could see were those words. Mom's debt. My wife Etta had died 3 years ago. I thought I knew everything about her. I thought we had no secrets. But Hunter knew something I did not. And he was using it to blackmail my daughter. He was holding my wife's memory hostage. I looked up from the paper. I looked at Hunter. The mask of the polite gentleman was gone. In his eyes I saw pure panic. He knew I knew. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I looked at the priest. "Stop the ceremony," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and loud enough to reach the back row without a microphone. "Excuse me?" the priest stammered. "I said stop it. There will be no wedding." The crowd erupted. People stood up. Richard Sterling Hunter's father came charging down the aisle. "Now look here, Hayes," Richard shouted. "You are making a scene. Sit down, or I will have security remove you." I ignored him. I reached for Zola. "Come on, baby girl. We are leaving." Zola collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her up. I felt her small frame shaking against my chest. I turned to walk her away from that altar of lies. "You are not going anywhere," Hunter screamed. He grabbed Zola's other arm. He yanked her back violently. She cried out in pain. That was his mistake. He touched her. He hurt her. I let go of Zola gently. I turned back to Hunter. I did not see a wealthy heir. I did not see a groom. I saw an enemy combatant. I am a 72-year-old man, but I was a Marine for 20 years. Muscle memory does not fade. It just waits. Hunter swung at me. It was a clumsy, desperate punch. I sidestepped it easily. I stepped into his guard. I drove my right fist into his jaw. The sound of the impact was like a gunshot. Hunter's head snapped back. His legs gave out. He crumbled to the white carpet of the altar unconscious before he hit the ground. Zola screamed. Patricia shrieked, "You killed him! You animal! You killed my son!" Patricia wailed, rushing to the fallen man. I stood over him, adjusting my cufflinks. He was breathing. He would have a broken jaw, maybe a concussion, but he would live. Unfortunately. I looked at Richard Sterling, who had frozen in his tracks. "Call the police," I said. "Call them right now, because I have a lot to tell them about extortion." Sirens were already wailing in the distance. They had been called the moment I stood up. The Sterlings had anticipated trouble. They just didn't anticipate that the trouble would knock their son out cold. I put my arm around Zola. She was staring at Hunter's motionless body, then at me. "Daddy," she whispered. "It is over," I told her. "We are going home." But I was wrong. It was not over. As 3 police cruisers screeched into the driveway, scattering the terrified guests, I knew this was just the beginning. I had humiliated the most powerful family in the county. I had broken their son's face, and I had exposed a secret that was worth millions. The officers ran toward us, hands on their holsters. "Get on the ground," one of them shouted, pointing a taser at my chest. I looked at Zola. I looked at the chaotic scene of the ruined wedding. "Do not say a word," I told her. I raised my hands slowly. I did not kneel. I stood tall. Let them arrest me. Let them try to break me. They had no idea who they had just declared war on. The steel handcuffs bit into my wrists. They were tight, unnecessarily tight. I sat on a metal chair bolted to the floor in an interrogation room that smelled of stale coffee and bleach. Across from me sat Deputy Miller. I had known Miller since he was a boy. I had pulled his truck out of a ditch 2 winters ago. But today, he did not look at me like a neighbor. He looked at me like a criminal. He looked at me through the lens of the Sterling family payroll. "You made a big mistake, Cornel," Miller said. He did not call me Mr. Hayes. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against a file folder. "Assault and battery in front of 300 witnesses. Richard Sterling is out for blood. He wants to press charges for everything we can think of. Disturbing the peace, felony assault, intent to cause bodily harm." I stared at the two-way mirror. I kept my face stone. I knew my rights. I also knew that in this county, rights were often determined by the size of your bank account. "I want my phone call," I said. My voice was gravel. Miller laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "You think you are getting out of here tonight. The judge is playing golf with Richard Sterling right now. You are going to cool off in a cell until Monday morning arraignment." I did not flinch. I did not beg. I just stared at him until he looked away. He stood up and scraped his chair against the linoleum. "I will process your paperwork. Don't get comfortable." He left me alone in the cold room. I closed my eyes. I was not worried about jail. I had survived the jungles of Vietnam. I could survive a weekend in a county lockup. I was worried about Zola. I had left her in the middle of a war zone with the enemy family. I had struck the first blow, but I had also left her undefended. An hour passed, then 2. The silence was heavy. Finally, the door buzzed and opened. It was not Miller. It was Zola. She looked small in the doorway. She was still wearing her wedding dress, but the veil was gone and the hem was stained with mud. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, but her eyes were swollen. She held a thick envelope in her hand. "Let's go, Dad," she said softly. I stood up. My knees popped. I looked behind her. Miller was standing there looking unhappy. She posted bail. Miller grunted. $10,000. Cash. "I don't know where a girl like her gets that kind of money on a Saturday, but you are free to go. For now." I walked out of the cell. I did not thank Miller. I did not look at him. I took my daughter's arm and we walked out of the station into the humid Texas afternoon. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the parking lot. My old Ford truck was parked next to a sleek black police cruiser. It looked battered. It looked defiant. We got into the truck. The leather seats were cracked and familiar. I turned the key and the engine roared to life with a cough of black smoke. I put it in gear and drove. We did not speak for the first 5 miles. I watched the fence posts blur past. I watched the dust kick up in the rearview mirror. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The silence in the cab was louder than the engine. It was thick with questions I was afraid to ask. $10,000, I finally said. I kept my eyes on the road. "That was your savings, Zola. That was the money for your veterinary clinic. You have been saving that since you were 16. Zola stared out the window. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. "It doesn't matter, Dad," she whispered. "None of it matters if they take you away." I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the gravel shoulder and came to a halt under an old oak tree. Dust swirled around us. I put the truck in park and turned to face her. "It matters," I said. My voice was low, but it filled the small space. "Everything matters. Why did you have that note? Why did you think you had to marry that snake to save me? What debt, Zola? What debt?" She broke. It started as a whimper, then turned into a sob that shook her entire body. She covered her face with her hands. "Mom," she choked out. "It was Mom." I felt a cold hand grip my heart. "Etta. My Etta. What about your mother?" I asked. "She was sick, Dad," Zola said through her tears. "Before she died. Those last 6 months. The insurance didn't cover the experimental treatment in Mexico. She didn't want you to know. She didn't want you to sell the ranch. She knew how much this land means to you. She knew it was your grandfather's legacy. So she took out a loan." I sat back against the seat. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Etta had protected me. She had shielded me from the cost of her own survival. And I had been too blind to see it. I thought we were managing. I thought the money was coming from savings. She went to a private lender. Zola continued wiping her eyes with the silk of her wedding dress. A shell company. She didn't know it belonged to the Sterlings. She borrowed $50,000. But the terms the terms were impossible. She passed away thinking she had handled it. But the interest kept growing. I looked out at the fields. My fields. They suddenly looked different. They didn't look like freedom anymore. They looked like collateral. Hunter found the papers 3 months ago, Zola said. Her voice was steady now, hardened by the truth. He came to me. He said he bought the debt. He said he owns the note. He told me that if I didn't marry him, he would foreclose. He would take the ranch and throw you out on the street at 72 years old. He said the wedding was the only way to merge the assets and forgive the loan. I closed my eyes. Rage burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. But beneath the rage was a deep, aching shame. My daughter had sold herself to save me. She was willing to walk into a marriage with a monster just to keep a roof over my head. And I had been judging her. I had thought she was blinded by his money. I had thought she was foolish. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. You should have told me, I said. He said he would put you in jail for fraud if I told you, Zola said. He said Mom committed fraud on the application and you were liable. I was scared, Dad. I was so scared. I started the truck again. The engine rumbled beneath us. We are going home, I said, and we are going to look at these papers. The rest of the drive was a blur. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and black. We turned onto the dirt road leading to our ranch. The sign above the gate swung in the wind. Hayes Ranch, established 1920. It looked peaceful. The cattle were grazing in the north pasture. The house lights were warm and inviting. But it was a lie. We were under siege. We walked into the kitchen. It was the same kitchen where I had eaten breakfast every day for 40 years. The same table where Etta used to roll out biscuit dough. Now it was a war room. Get the papers, I said. Zola went to her bag. She pulled out a thick folder. She laid it on the table. I put on my reading glasses. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed. Now there was only the mission. I opened the file. I read the promissory note. I read the loan agreement. I read the fine print that was designed to be unreadable. I saw Etta's signature at the bottom. It was shaky. She must have signed it when the pain was bad. A tear pricked my eye, but I blinked it away. I had to be a soldier now. I looked at the numbers. $50,000 principal, but the interest rate was variable, tied to a predatory index that I had never seen before. Compounded daily, late fees, administrative fees, total amount due, $212,000. I cursed under my breath. This was not a loan. This was a robbery. But that was not the worst part. I flipped to the last page. There was a clause highlighted in yellow. Hunter must have highlighted it to taunt her. The acceleration clause. In the event of default, the lender reserves the right to demand immediate payment of the full balance. Furthermore, the borrower agrees to pledge the property located at 500 County Road as sole collateral. In the event of non-payment within 24 hours of demand, title shall transfer immediately to the lender via deed in lieu of foreclosure. I read it twice. My blood ran cold. Title shall transfer immediately. They didn't even have to go through a court foreclosure auction. Etta had signed a deed in lieu. She had signed away the farm to save me from the burden of the process, not understanding what she was doing. I looked at the date on the demand letter included in the file. It was dated yesterday, the day before the wedding. Hunter had issued the formal demand the moment Zola agreed to the rehearsal dinner. It was his insurance policy. Zola, I said. My voice was very quiet. When did he give you this specific letter? This morning, she said. Before the ceremony. He said it was my wedding gift. He said he would tear it up after the vows. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was Saturday. The demand was issued Friday. The 24-hour grace period for payment was not business days. It was calendar hours. I checked my watch. It was 7 p.m. The letter was time-stamped 9 a.m. Friday. Wait, that didn't make sense. If the deadline was 9 a.m. Saturday, we had already lost the ranch. But Hunter had still tried to go through with the wedding. Why? Then I saw it. The addendum. In the event of a marriage between the parties, the debt is forgiven. In the event of cancellation or annulment of the ceremony, the grace period is extended to the following Monday at 9 a.m. to allow for liquidation of assets. He had covered every base. If she married him, he got the land through marriage. If she ran away, he gave her until Monday morning to pay $200,000, knowing she couldn't do it. Monday morning. I looked at Zola. "We have until Monday morning," I said. She looked at me with wide eyes. "But Dad, that is 36 hours away. It is Sunday tomorrow. The banks are closed. We can't raise $200,000 on a Sunday." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark silhouette of the barn. I thought about the punch I had thrown. I thought about the look on Richard Sterling's face. They expected me to panic. They expected me to pack my bags and leave. They did not know who they were dealing with. "I am not going to raise the money," I said. Zola looked confused. "Then what are we going to do? We can't fight this in court. The signature is real. The contract is legal." I turned back to her. I took off my glasses and folded them on the table. "I am not going to pay them, Zola. I am going to make them wish they never heard the name Hayes." I walked to the hallway closet. I reached to the top shelf and pulled out a heavy metal box. I blew the dust off the lid. It was my old strongbox from the service. Inside was not money. Inside were favors. Inside were names of men I had served with, men who owed me, and one name in particular. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. It rang 3 times. "Yeah." A voice answered. It was gruff, tired. "Jaron," I said. "It is Cornel." There was a long pause. "Cornel Hayes," the voice said. "I haven't heard from you since the funeral. You in trouble, Marine?" I looked at the papers on the table. I looked at my terrified daughter. "I am not in trouble, Jaron. I am in a war. And I need a heavy hitter." I hung up the phone. "Get some sleep, Zola," I said. "Tomorrow is Sunday, the Lord's Day. But for us it is going to be a day of reckoning." Zola looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and doubt. She did not see a way out. She saw a mountain of debt and a powerful enemy. But I saw something else. I saw an opening. Because Hunter Sterling had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was just a rancher. He forgot that before I was a rancher, I was a man who cleared minefields for a living. And I had just spotted the tripwire. I looked at the addendum again. Monday at 9 a.m. 36 hours. That was not a deadline. That was a countdown. And when the clock hit 0, the explosion wasn't going to take out my ranch. It was going to take out the Sterlings. I turned off the kitchen light. Darkness swallowed the room, but in the dark I could see clearer than ever. Sunday morning in Texas is usually quiet. It is a time for church bells and family breakfasts. But for me, this Sunday was a countdown to execution. I had 24 hours to find $200,000 or lose the land my grandfather died to protect. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the First National Bank. The branch was closed, of course. But the ATM in the vestibule was open 24 hours. I had a plan. It was a desperate plan, but it was all I had. I had $60,000 in a certificate of deposit. I had another $40,000 in my personal savings. It was not enough to pay the whole debt, but it was enough to show good faith. It was enough to hire a shark of a lawyer from Houston to file an injunction and stop the clock. I walked into the glass vestibule. The air conditioning was cold. It hummed with the sound of money. I took out my debit card. My hand was steady. I inserted the card into the machine. I entered my PIN. I selected withdrawal. The screen paused. It thought for a long time. Then a red box appeared. Transaction denied. Contact your branch. I frowned. I tried again. Maybe I hit the wrong button. My fingers were thick, calloused from 50 years of handling ropes and reins. I typed carefully this time. Transaction denied. Card retained. The machine whirred and swallowed my card. It did not give it back. I stared at the screen. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. That card was my lifeline. Without it, I could not even buy gas to get to Houston. I pulled out my phone and dialed the bank's 24-hour fraud hotline. I tapped my foot on the linoleum floor. "Welcome to First National," the automated voice said. "Please enter your account number." I entered it. "We are sorry," the voice said. "This account has been flagged for suspicious activity by the Department of Homeland Security. All assets are frozen pending investigation. To speak to a representative, please hold. Estimated wait time is 4 hours. Homeland Security. I lowered the phone slowly. My blood ran cold. This was not a banking error. This was a targeted strike. Someone had reported me for money laundering or terrorism. It was absurd. I was a cattle rancher. But in the post-9/11 world, a single anonymous tip could freeze a man's life for weeks. And I didn't have weeks. I had until tomorrow morning. I stepped out of the vestibule into the blinding morning sun. I felt naked. I felt powerless. I had money. I had worked for it, saved it, bled for it. But a few keystrokes by a faceless bureaucrat had turned me into a pauper. "Well, look who is up early." The voice came from behind me. It was smooth, cultured, and dripping with false friendliness. I turned around. Richard Sterling was leaning against his silver Mercedes. He was wearing a beige linen suit and a Panama hat. He looked like a plantation owner from a century ago. He was holding 2 cups of coffee from the cafe across the street. "Morning, Cornel," he said. He held out a cup. "You look like you could use some caffeine. Rough night." I looked at the coffee. I looked at his face. I wanted to smash both. "What did you do, Richard?" I asked. My voice was low. "Me." He feigned innocence. "I am just a concerned father, Cornel. I heard about the trouble at the bank. Terrible business. These automated systems are so sensitive these days, especially when there are large, unexplained transfers involved." He took a sip of his coffee. His eyes smiled over the rim of the cup. "You flagged my account," I said. "I am a board member of the Bank Cornel. It is my fiduciary duty to report suspicious behavior." And an old rancher suddenly trying to liquidate assets after assaulting a prominent citizen. That looks like flight risk. That looks like criminal activity. I had to make the call. He was enjoying this. He was playing with his food before he ate it. "Unfreeze it," I said. "I can't." He shrugged. "It is out of my hands now. It is a federal matter. It will take weeks to clear up. Maybe months." He took a step closer. His cologne smelled of lavender and arrogance. "But there is another way," he said softly. I waited. I knew this was coming. This was the pitch. "I am a reasonable man, Cornel. I know you are in a tight spot. That debt your wife left, it is a heavy burden. And with your accounts frozen, you are going to default tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. That is a fact." He pulled a folded document from his inside jacket pocket. "This is a purchase agreement," he said. "I am offering to buy the ranch. Cash. Today. I will pay off the debt, and I will give you an extra $50,000 to start over somewhere else. Maybe a nice retirement home in Florida, somewhere far away from here." He held the pen out to me. "Sign it, Cornel. Save your dignity. Don't make us send the sheriff to evict you. Don't make Zola watch her father being dragged off the property in chains." I looked at the pen. It was gold. It probably cost more than my first truck. I looked at Richard. "You don't want the land for grazing," I said. He chuckled. "Cows, no, Cornel. Nobody makes money on cows anymore. It is what is underneath the grass. The lithium deposit. We have the geological surveys. It is worth $50 million. And you are sitting on it letting cows poop on a fortune. It is a waste. It is a sin against capitalism." $50 million. He was offering to pay off a $200,000 debt to steal $50 million. I looked him in the eye. "My grandfather bought that land in 1920, I said. "He bought it when men like you wouldn't let men like him walk on the sidewalk. He worked it until his hands bled. He is buried under the oak tree on the North Ridge. My wife is buried next to him." "So," Richard said, impatient. "So I am not selling you a piece of dirt, Richard. I am holding the line." I slapped the pen out of his hand. It clattered onto the asphalt. "You can freeze my money," I said. "You can bribe the police. But you are not getting my signature. If you want my land, you will have to take it, and I promise you the price will be higher than you can afford." Richard's face turned red. The mask slipped. "You stupid old mule," he hissed. "You have nothing. You are broke. You are alone. And tomorrow morning I will own every blade of grass you possess." I walked past him. I got into my truck. I did not look back. I drove out of the lot, leaving him standing there in his expensive suit, staring at his gold pen in the dirt. I drove fast. My mind was racing. The financial avenue was closed. Richard had checkmated me there. I could not pay the debt with cash. But I had one card left. The horses. I had 12 quarter horses in my stable. Championship bloodlines. I had a standing offer from a breeder in Oklahoma. He had offered me $25,000 a head for the breeding stock if I could load them up today, if I could get them to Oklahoma by tonight. I could come back with a cashier's check for $300,000. I could drop it on Richard's desk tomorrow morning and watch him choke. It was a long shot. It meant selling the heart of the ranch. It meant saying goodbye to animals I had raised from foals. But it was the only way to save the land. I pressed the accelerator. The truck rattled as I pushed it to 80 miles per hour. I called Zola. "Get the trailer hooked up," I shouted over the engine noise. "Get the paperwork ready. We are moving the herd." Dad Zola sounded confused. "What happened at the bank?" "Don't ask. Just get the trailer. We are going to Oklahoma." I hung up. I turned onto the county road. The dust plume rose behind me like smoke. I pulled into the ranch gate 10 minutes later. I didn't wait for the automatic opener. I drove around it through the ditch, bouncing over the ruts. I drove straight to the barn. The trailer was there. Zola was standing next to it, but she wasn't hooking it up. She was standing still. Too still. Her hands were covering her mouth. I slammed the truck door and ran toward her. "Zola," I yelled. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She just pointed at the barn. I ran past her. I grabbed the heavy sliding door and shoved it open. Sunlight flooded into the central aisle. Dust motes danced in the air. My breath stopped. Silence. That was the first thing that hit me. A barn is never silent. There is the sound of hooves shuffling in straw, the sound of chewing, the soft nickers of greeting. But there was nothing. Only the buzzing of flies. I walked down the aisle. My boots echoed on the concrete. Stall 1. Empty. The gate was hanging open, the latch broken. Stall 2. Empty. Stall 3. Empty. I ran. I checked every single stall. 12 horses. Gone. My chest heaved. I felt like I was drowning. This wasn't possible. The horses were here when we left for the police station yesterday. I ran out the back door of the barn. I saw the tracks. Heavy tire tracks. An 18-wheeler cattle hauler. They had backed right up to the loading ramp. There were boot prints in the mud, many of them. They had come in the night, while Zola and I were at the police station, while I was sitting in a cell and she was driving to get bail money. They had come in and stripped me clean. I saw something stuck to the fence post near the ramp. I walked over to it. It was a piece of paper nailed into the wood. I pulled it off. It was a receipt. A slaughterhouse receipt. Received 12 head of livestock. Grade C. Process immediately. I fell to my knees. I retched. They hadn't just stolen them to sell them. They had sent championship quarter horses, animals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, to a slaughterhouse, to be turned into dog food. It was an act of pure wanton destruction. It wasn't about money. It was about hurting me. It was about executing my family members one by one. Richard Sterling had known I would try to sell the horses. He had anticipated my move, and he had destroyed the asset before I could play it. Dad. Zola was behind me. She was reading the receipt over my shoulder. Her voice broke. They killed Star and Buster and Lady. She collapsed into the dirt screaming. It was a sound of pure agony. I knelt there for a long time. I listened to my daughter cry. I looked at the tire tracks in the mud. Something inside me snapped, not like a twig, like a steel cable. The fear was gone. The panic about the deadline was gone. The worry about the bank account was gone. All that was left was cold, hard clarity. This was no longer a legal battle. This was no longer a financial dispute. Richard Sterling had invaded my home. He had stolen my creatures. He had made my daughter scream in pain. He wanted a war. He wanted to break me. I stood up. I folded the slaughterhouse receipt and put it in my pocket right next to the note from the wedding bouquet. I reached down and pulled Zola up. I wiped the tears from her face with my thumb. "Stop crying, Zola," I said. My voice was different. It was flat. It was dead. "But Dad," she sobbed. "They are gone. We have nothing left. We can't pay." I looked toward the house. I looked toward the gun safe in the study. "We are not paying," I said. I walked back toward the truck. "Where are you going?" Zola asked, running after me. "I am going to make a phone call," I said. "Not to the bank, and not to the lawyer." I picked up my phone. I dialed Jaron again. "Jaron," I said when he answered. "Cornel," he asked. "You sound bad." "Change of plans," I said. "Forget the injunction, forget the legal defense. What happened?" Jaron asked. "They took the horses," I said. There was silence on the line. Jaren knew what those horses meant to me. I need you to come to the ranch, I said, and bring your camera, and bring the file you have on the EPA violations from the chemical plant in 1998. Cornel. Jaren's voice was cautious. That is ancient history, and that file is sealed. If we open that, we are declaring war on the entire county council. I looked at the empty barn. We are already at war, Jaren. I am just changing the battlefield. I hung up. I looked at Zola. Go inside, I said. Pack a bag. Are we leaving? She asked, hope in her eyes. No, I said. We are digging in, because when they come tomorrow morning with the sheriff and the eviction notice, they are going to find something they didn't expect. What? She asked. They think they are evicting an old man, I said. They are going to find out they are evicting a landmine. I walked into the barn. I picked up a shovel. There was work to do. If Richard Sterling wanted my land, I was going to make sure that by the time he got it, it would be the most expensive dirt in American history. The financial leverage was gone. But I had found a lever much longer and much more dangerous. It was time to burn the rule book. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon finally broke over the ranch. It did not start with a drizzle. It started with a deluge. The sky opened up and dropped a wall of water that turned the dust of the corral into a slick black paste. Thunder rattled the windows of the house, but Zola was not inside. She was standing on the porch clutching the slaughterhouse receipt. Dad, she shouted over the wind. There are only 11 horses listed here. Thunder is not on the list. Thunder was my prize stallion. He was a black quarter horse with a white diamond on his forehead. He was strong. He was mean to strangers, but gentle as a lamb with Zola. If Thunder wasn't on the truck, maybe he had fought back. Maybe he had broken loose. I grabbed my flashlight and a rain slicker. Stay here, Zola, I ordered. No, she said. Her voice was thin but stubborn. I am coming with you. We walked out into the tempest. The wind whipped Zola's ruined wedding dress around her legs like a shroud. She slipped in the mud, but she got back up. We headed for the north pasture. That was where Thunder would go if he was frightened. That was the high ground. The rain was cold. It stung my face like buckshot. My old knees ached with every step. I was 72 years old and I should have been sitting in a recliner with a warm cup of tea. Instead, I was marching through a hurricane searching for a ghost. We walked for an hour. The beam of my flashlight cut through the rain, but it could not penetrate the darkness more than a few feet. Every shadow looked like a horse. Every sound of the wind sounded like a whinny. It felt like the world was ending. The elements were conspiring with the Sterlings to beat us down. The mud sucked at my boots, trying to hold me in place. The wind pushed against my chest, trying to knock me over. But I kept walking. I was a Marine. I had marched through monsoons in Vietnam. I had marched through grief when Etta died. I would march through this. Dad, look. Zola pointed. By the creek bed there was a dark shape. It was not moving. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran, sliding down the muddy bank. Zola followed me. Please let him be alive. I heard her pray. Please, God, let him be just sleeping. I reached the shape. I shined the light. It was Thunder. He was lying on his side in the rising water of the creek. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. The rain washed over his black coat, making it shine like oil. He hadn't drowned, and he hadn't died of natural causes. There was a small dark hole right between his eyes. A single clean shot. They hadn't taken him because he was too dangerous to load, or maybe because they knew he was my favorite, so they had executed him right here in the pasture and left him for me to find. It was a message. It was a statement. We can touch anything you love. Zola made a sound that I will never forget. It was a low, guttural wail of pure defeat. She fell onto the muddy carcass of the horse, burying her face in his wet mane. It is over, Dad, she sobbed. Her voice was muffled by the rain and the horse's fur. Just give them the land. Give them everything. I can't do this anymore. Look at him. Look what they did. If we keep fighting, they will kill us too. She looked up at me. Her face was streaked with mud and mascara and rain. She looked broken. The spirit I had seen in the truck was gone, washed away by the storm and the cruelty of our enemies. Sign the papers, Dad, she pleaded. Please. I just want it to stop. I looked down at her. I felt a surge of pity, but I shoved it down. Pity would not save us. Pity would get us evicted. pity would let Hunter Sterling win. I reached down and grabbed Zola by the shoulders. I hauled her up out of the mud. I shook her hard. "Stop it!" I shouted over the thunder. "Look at me!" She blinked, surprised by my roughness. "You think this is about a debt?" I yelled. "You think this is about $50,000 your mother borrowed? You think they killed this horse because they are mean?" I let go of her with one hand and reached down. I grabbed a handful of the wet black earth. I shoved it in front of her face. "Look at this, Zola. What do you see?" "Mud," she cried. "It is just mud, Dad." "Number one," I roared. "It is not mud. It is the future." I threw the dirt into the wind. "Underneath this pasture, underneath where this horse is lying, there is a deposit of lithium worth $50 million. Zola went still. The rain plastered her hair to her skull. "What?" she whispered. "They don't want the ranch because they hate us," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "They want it because the world needs batteries. They want to strip mine this land and turn it into a toxic pit to feed the electric car industry. Hunter didn't want to marry you. He wanted to marry a mining permit." I pointed at the dead horse. "They killed Thunder because they wanted to break your spirit. They wanted you to do exactly what you are doing right now. They wanted you to beg me to quit." I stepped closer to her. I gripped her chin, forcing her to look me in the eye. "Are you going to let them win? Are you going to let them dig up your mother's grave to get to the minerals underneath? Are you going to let Thunder die for nothing?" Zola stared at me. I saw the gears turning in her mind. I saw the shock turn to understanding. And then I saw the understanding turn to rage. $50 million, she repeated. "They tried to buy me off for $50,000, I said. "They think we are stupid. They think we are just dumb farmers who don't know what we are sitting on." Zola looked down at the horse. She reached out and touched his cold nose. She stood up. She wiped the mud from her face. She took a deep breath. "Let's go home, Dad," she said. We walked back to the house in silence. We left Thunder where he lay. We would bury him properly when the war was over. Right now, we had to survive the night. We didn't sleep. We sat in the kitchen cleaning my shotgun and reviewing the files Jaren had sent over via email before the internet cut out. The storm raged outside, battering the old farmhouse, but inside the air was still and cold. Morning came slowly. The gray light filtered through the windows, revealing the wreckage of the night. The yard was a lake of mud. Tree branches littered the driveway. At 7 a.m. sharp, a car pulled up to the gate. It wasn't a sheriff's deputy. It was a man in a cheap suit driving a beige sedan, a process server. I watched from the window as he stepped out of his car, trying to avoid the puddles. He taped a thick envelope to the gate post. He took a picture of it with his phone. Then he got back in his car and drove away. I walked out to the gate. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone. I pulled the envelope off the post. It was heavy. I opened it right there in the driveway. It wasn't an eviction notice. It wasn't a foreclosure demand. It was a court summons for an emergency hearing in the matter of the estate of Cornel Hayes, petitioner Richard Sterling, nature of action, emergency guardianship, and conservatorship. I read the motion attached. It claimed that I was suffering from dementia. It cited my violent outburst at the wedding as proof of mental instability. It claimed I was being manipulated by my daughter to squander family assets. It requested that the court immediately appoint a professional guardian to manage my property and medical decisions. And the proposed guardian was Richard Sterling. I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. They weren't just trying to take my land. They were trying to take me. They wanted to declare me legally dead while I was still breathing so they could sign the sale papers themselves. I looked at the house where Zola was watching me from the porch. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was senile. I crumpled the summons in my fist. I was about to show them exactly how sharp my mind still was. The storm had passed, but the hurricane was just beginning. Jaren arrived at the ranch an hour later. He did not drive a luxury car. He drove a beat-up sedan that smelled of cigar smoke and old fast food wrappers. Jaren was not a lawyer who had an office in a glass tower. He was a lawyer who worked out of the back of a pool hall. He was 68 years old, and he had lost his left eye in the same ambush that gave me my shrapnel scar. We were not just friends. We were survivors. He threw the court summons onto my kitchen table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the gun cleaning oil. "This is bad, Cornel," Jaren said. He did not sugarcoat it. He never did. "How bad?" I asked. "They are not suing you for the money," Jaren said, pacing the floor. "If they sued for the money, we could drag it out for months. We could file bankruptcy. We could countersue for the horse. But this is the nuclear option. He pointed a crooked finger at the document. Guardianship. They are claiming you have lost your mind. They are claiming that your attack on Hunter at the wedding was not the act of a protective father, but the symptom of advanced dementia. They are using the assault charge to prove you are a danger to yourself and others. I am not crazy, Jaron, I said. You know that. It does not matter what I know, Jaron snapped. It matters what Judge Holloway thinks, and Holloway plays poker with Richard Sterling every Tuesday night. I looked at Zola. She was sitting in this corner hugging her knees. She looked terrified. If they win this, Jaron continued, you lose everything. Not just the land. You lose your rights. You won't be able to sign a check. You won't be able to hire a lawyer. You won't even be able to choose your own doctor. You become a child in the eyes of the law, and Richard Sterling becomes your daddy. I felt the blood boil in my veins. This was slavery. It was slavery with a court stamp. They want to silence me, I said. They want to neutralize you, Jaron corrected. If Richard is your guardian, he can sign the sale of the ranch to his own shell company on your behalf. He can claim it is in your best financial interest to pay off the debt. He sells the $50 million lithium deposit to himself for pennies and uses your own hand to do it. I stood up. I walked to the window. The mud outside was drying in the sun, but the stain of the dead horse was still there in my mind. We fight, I said. We will try. We, Jaron said, packing his briefcase. But the hearing is in 2 hours. They gave us no time to prepare. That is the point. It is an ambush, Cornel. Just like in the jungle. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Zola sat in the back seat. She looked at the passing scenery like she was saying goodbye to it. When we walked up the marble steps of the county courthouse, I felt the weight of the system pressing down on me. This building was supposed to be a house of justice, but today it felt like a slaughterhouse. The courtroom was cold. Richard Sterling was already there sitting at the plaintiff table. He looked fresh, rested, and confident. Next to him sat Hunter. My son-in-law Hut was wearing a neck brace. It was a prop. I knew I hadn't hit him that hard, but it looked good for the judge. Judge Holloway swept into the room. He was a small man with a face like a dried apple. He didn't look at me. He looked at Richard and nodded. All rise, the bailiff shouted. We sat down. The air was thick with tension. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, you have filed an emergency motion. State your case. Richard's lawyer stood up. He was a young shark in a $3,000 suit. Your Honor, he began, we are here with heavy hearts. Mr. Sterling is deeply concerned for the welfare of his neighbor and former friend, Mr. Cornel Hayes. As you know, there was a violent incident this past Saturday. Mr. Hayes assaulted the groom at his own daughter's wedding. Objection. Jaron stood up. His voice was gravel. Mr. Hayes was defending his daughter from physical aggression. Overruled. The judge said without looking up. Sit down, counsel. The young lawyer smiled. He picked up a remote control. We have video evidence, Your Honor, taken by the wedding videographer. A screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed. I watched in horror as the video played. It showed me standing at the altar. It showed me punching Hunter. The sound of the impact was amplified, but that was it. Where is the rest of it? I shouted, standing up. Where is the part where he grabbed my daughter? Where is the part where she screamed? Order! The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, or I will have you removed. They cut it, I said, pointing at the screen. They edited the tape. Jaron pulled me down by my jacket. Quiet, Cornel, you are making it worse. But I couldn't be quiet. I was watching a lie become the truth. The video looped again and again. Me punching, Hunter falling, me punching, Hunter falling. It looked unprovoked. It looked vicious. It looked like the act of a madman. Your Honor, the lawyer said, turning off the screen. This violent outburst, combined with Mr. Hayes's sudden irrational refusal to pay a legitimate debt, indicates a rapid cognitive decline. He is destroying his financial future and physically attacking those trying to help him. We have a statement from the bank indicating suspicious, erratic behavior. We have a police report. We believe Mr. Hayes is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. Jaron stood up to cross-examine. He tried to bring up the debt. He tried to bring up the predatory interest rates. He tried to bring up the dead horse. Relevance. The judge interrupted every time. This is a competency hearing, counsel, not a contract dispute. Stick to the client's mental state. Jaron tried to call Zola to the stand. Denied, the judge said. The witness is clearly under the undue influence of her father. Her testimony is compromised. It was a setup, a complete and total setup. I sat there gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I was witnessing a lynching. They weren't using a rope. They were using procedure. Judge Holloway didn't even take a recess to deliberate. He just shuffled some papers on his desk. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, and in the interest of public safety and the protection of the respondent's estate, I am granting the emergency temporary conservatorship. Number Zola gasped behind me. Mr. Richard Sterling is hereby appointed as temporary guardian of the person and estate of Cornel Hayes. The judge continued. All bank accounts are to be transferred to the guardianship account. Mr. Hayes is restricted from entering into any contract selling any property or making any financial withdrawals greater than $50 without the guardian's approval. $50. I was a man who had run a business for 40 years, and now I had the allowance of a child. Furthermore, the judge said, looking at me for the first time with cold, dead eyes, due to the violent nature of the incident, Mr. Hayes is ordered to surrender all firearms to the sheriff's department immediately, and he is to remain at his primary residence under the supervision of the guardian until a permanent hearing can be scheduled in 30 days. He banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. I stood up. I felt dizzy. The room spun. Richard Sterling walked over to our table. He didn't look at Jaron. He looked at me. He leaned in close so only I could hear. I told you, Cornel, he whispered. I told you I would own you. I looked at him. I wanted to reach out and crush his windpipe. I wanted to finish what I started at the wedding, but I saw the bailiff's hand on his taser. That was what Richard wanted. He wanted me to lash out again. He wanted me to prove the judge right. I took a deep breath. I forced my hands to unclench. You don't own me, Richard, I said softly. You just rented a problem you can't solve. We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining, but the world looked gray. I was no longer a free man. I was a ward of the state. I was property. We drove back to the ranch. Jaron didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. The law had failed us. When we pulled into the driveway, there was a sheriff's deputy waiting. He asked for my guns. I went to the safe. I took out my hunting rifles, my shotgun, the pistol I kept by the bed. I handed them over one by one. Each one felt like I was handing over a piece of my soul. The deputy put them in his trunk. Mr. Sterling will be by tomorrow to inspect the property and discuss the budget, the deputy said. You stay out of trouble, Cornel. He drove away. I stood on the porch with Zola. The house felt different. It felt smaller. The fences didn't mark my land anymore. They marked my cage. Zola was crying again silently. What do we do now, Dad? She asked. You can't fight them. You can't even buy gas. I looked at the empty gun rack. I looked at the slaughterhouse receipt still in my pocket. I looked at the tire tracks where they had taken my horses. They took my money, I said. They took my legal rights. They took my guns. I turned to Zola. But they forgot one thing. What? She asked. I tapped my temple. They didn't take my memory, and they didn't take the truth. I walked into the house. I went to the kitchen and pulled out the old radio I used to listen to during storms. Jaron, I said to my lawyer, who was still standing by his car looking defeated. Yeah, Cornel, you still have that file on the EPA violations, the one you said was sealed. Yeah, it is in my trunk. Why? Leave it, I said. But Cornel, Jaron said, you can't use it. You have no legal standing. If you release that information, Richard will sue you for defamation and breach of privacy. He will throw you in a psychiatric ward. I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. Let him try, I said. He made me a prisoner in my own house. That means I have a lot of free time, and I am going to use every second of it to burn his empire to the ground from the inside out. I took the file from Jaron. Go home, Jaron, I said. Watch the news. I walked back into my prison. I locked the door. Richard Sterling thought he had won. He thought he had trapped a helpless old man, but he had made a fatal error. He had trapped me in the one place where I was most dangerous, my home. And I wasn't just going to defend it. I was going to turn it into a weapon. The first thing to go was the hum. You don't realize how loud a house is until it dies. The refrigerator stopped buzzing. The air conditioner, which had been fighting the Texas heat, gave a final rattle and silenced. Then the water pressure dropped. I turned the faucet in the kitchen and it sputtered brown sludge before running dry. It was not a power outage. The sun was shining. The neighbors down the road had their porch lights on. This was a siege. Richard Sterling had cut the utilities. As my legal guardian, he had the power to manage my bills. And he had decided that Cornel Hayes did not need electricity or running water. By noon, the house was an oven. The temperature inside climbed to 95 degrees. The food in the freezer began to thaw. Zola paced the living room floor. She was sweating. Her hair was matted to her forehead. She looked like a trapped animal. "We have to call someone, Dad," she said. Her voice was thin and edged with panic. "This is illegal. They can't just starve us out." I sat in my armchair by the window. I was cleaning my fingernails with a pocket knife. It was the only weapon the sheriff hadn't taken because he didn't think it counted. "They can do whatever they want," I said. Richard told the utility company I was a danger to myself and that the electricity was a fire hazard. He told the water company there was a leak he couldn't afford to fix. "He is squeezing us, Zola. He wants us to walk out that front gate and surrender." "I am hungry," she whispered. I pointed to the pantry. "We have canned beans. We have peaches. We have water in the emergency jugs. We can last for weeks." "I don't want to last for weeks," she shouted. She kicked the coffee table. "I want to live. I want to take a shower. I want to charge my phone." She pulled her phone out of her pocket. It was dead. A black brick. Without electricity, we were cut off from the world. We couldn't call Jaren. We couldn't call the news. We were alone in a silent, boiling house. Zola grabbed her purse. She walked to the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I am going to the convenience store on the highway," she said. "I am going to buy water. I am going to buy a charger. I am going to get us some real food." "Sit down, Zola," I ordered. "That is what they want. They are waiting for you." "I don't care," she screamed. "I am not a soldier, Dad. I am not you. I can't live like this." She slammed the door behind her. I watched her walk down the long, dusty driveway. She was walking fast, angry, and determined. She thought she was fighting for her independence. She didn't realize she was walking into a kill zone. I did not run after her. I could not stop her. She needed to see the enemy with her own eyes, but I was not going to let her face them alone. I walked to the back door. I opened it quietly. "Gunner," I whispered. From under the porch, a shadow emerged. Gunner was a Rottweiler mix. He weighed 90 pounds. He was black as coal and silent as the grave. The sheriff had taken my guns, but he hadn't looked under the porch. He hadn't seen Gunner because Gunner only came out when I called him. I signaled with my hand. "Stay low." We moved through the tall grass running parallel to the driveway. We were invisible. We were hunting. Zola reached the main gate. She pushed it open. She stepped out onto the county road. She looked left, then right, hoping to see a passing car. She didn't see a car. She saw a black SUV parked under the shade of a mesquite tree 50 yards away. The door opened. Hunter Sterling stepped out. He was not wearing his tuxedo. He was wearing jeans and a tight t-shirt. The neck brace was gone. He looked healthy. He looked dangerous. "Going somewhere, princess," he called out. Zola froze. She took a step back. "Leave me alone, Hunter," she yelled. "I am just going to the store." Hunter laughed. He walked toward her. He didn't walk like a gentleman. He walked like a predator who had cornered a rabbit. "You don't have permission to leave," he said. "Richard is your father's guardian. That means he decides who comes and goes. And since you are living under his roof, technically, you are trespassing right now." Zola turned to run back through the gate. Hunter was faster. He lunged. He grabbed her by the ponytail. Zola screamed. It was a sharp, terrified sound that cut through the heat. Hunter yanked her back. She fell onto the gravel. He stood over her. "You think you are smart," he spat. "You think you can humiliate me at the altar and just walk away. You cost me millions, Zola. Do you know how much money I lost because of your little stunt with the note?" He kicked dirt onto her dress. "Please," Zola sobbed. "Just let me go." "No," he said. He reached down and grabbed her arm, hauling her up. His grip was bruising. "You are coming with me. We are going to have a long talk about that debt. And then you are going to sign a new agreement, one that gives me the ranch and keeps your father out of the asylum. Or maybe I will put him in the asylum anyway." He dragged her toward the SUV. Zola fought. She scratched at his face. Hunter slapped her. It was a hard, brutal slap that knocked the wind out of her. That was the signal. I was 20 yards away, hidden in the brush. I felt the old rage turn into cold calculation. Gunner, I said. Kill. The dog did not bark. He launched himself from the grass like a missile. Hunter never saw him coming. He only heard the sound of 90 pounds of muscle hitting him in the chest. Gunner hit him with the force of a freight train. Hunter went down screaming. Gunner's jaws locked onto Hunter's forearm, the one that had been holding Zola. "Get him off!" Hunter shrieked. His voice was high and pathetic. He thrashed in the dust, kicking and punching. But Gunner was a machine. He shook his head violently, tearing at the expensive fabric of Hunter's shirt and the flesh beneath it. Zola scrambled backward, crawling on her hands and knees away from the violence. I stepped out of the bushes. I stood over them. Hunter looked up at me. His eyes were wide with terror. "Call him off," he begged. "He is killing me." I looked at the dog. I looked at the man who had starved my daughter. "Drop it, Gunner," I said calmly. The dog released instantly. He stepped back, but he kept growling a low rumble that vibrated in the air. He stood between me and Hunter, his teeth bared, ready for the next command. Hunter clutched his bleeding arm. He was crying. Snot and tears ran down his face. "You are crazy," he whimpered. "You are a psycho." I took a step forward. Hunter scrambled back, scraping his heels on the asphalt. "Get out of here," I said. Hunter didn't wait. He scrambled to his feet, stumbling toward his SUV. He was bleeding, he was terrified, and he was broken. But as he ran, something fell out of his pocket. It hit the ground with a clatter. His phone. He stopped. He looked at the phone, then at the dog. Gunner took a step forward. He snapped his jaws. Hunter made a choice. He chose his life over his data. He jumped into the SUV, slammed the door, and peeled out tires, screeching, leaving a cloud of blue smoke. I looked at the phone lying in the dust. It was unlocked. The screen was cracked, but it was glowing. "Zola," I said. She was still on the ground, shaking. She looked at me, then at the phone. "Pick it up," I said. She crawled over to it. Her hands were trembling. She picked up the device. "We have electricity now," I said, pointing at the phone, "and we have a window into the enemy's mind." Zola looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. "Dad," she whispered, "he has a group chat open. It is with Richard and someone named the chemist." I helped her up. I put my arm around her. She buried her face in my shoulder. She smelled of fear and sweat, but she was safe. "Let's go inside," I said. "We have reading to do." We walked back up the driveway. Gunner trotted beside us, his tail wagging slightly. He had done his job. The siege was still on. The heat was still unbearable. But the balance of power had just shifted. Hunter Sterling had made a mistake. He had brought a phone to a dogfight. And now we had the weapon we needed to break the walls down. Jaron did not come through the front gate. He knew better. The sheriff had a patrol car parked down the road, watching my house like a hawk. Jaron parked his rusted sedan a mile away in the creek bed and hiked through the mesquite brush. He came in through the back door mud on his boots and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He looked like a weary soldier reporting for duty. I sat at the kitchen table with Zola. The phone Hunter had dropped lay in the center of the table like an unexploded bomb. It was cracked, dusty, but it was alive. We had charged it using a battery pack from my emergency radio. "Can you get in?" I asked Jaron. He pulled out a spectacle kit and put on his glasses. He looked at the device. "It is an iPhone, encrypted. If we guess the passcode wrong 10 times, it wipes itself clean. And then we have nothing but a paperweight." He looked at Zola. "You were with him for 2 years, Zola. What is his code?" Zola bit her lip. She looked pale. "I don't know. He never let me touch his phone. He said it was for business. He always turned the screen away." "Think," Jaron said. His voice was urgent. "Is it his birthday? His mother's birthday. The day he graduated. Narcissists usually pick numbers that celebrate themselves." Zola shook her head. "We tried his birthday. Incorrect. We tried his social security number, last 4 digits. Incorrect. We had 8 tries left. Try the date he met you," I suggested. Zola typed it in. The screen shook. Incorrect. 7 tries left. Try the price of the wedding ring, Jaron said. Zola typed. Incorrect. The room grew hot. The air conditioner was still dead. Sweat dripped down my back. We were staring at the key to our salvation, and we were locked out. Zola closed her eyes. She was thinking back, replaying the trauma of the last few months. "He loves money," she whispered. "He loves winning." She opened her eyes. She looked at me. "The debt," she said. "The amount of Mom's debt. He mentioned it every single day. He said it was the price of my freedom. 212,000, I said. 212000. It was 6 digits. Zola's finger hovered over the glass. Her hand was trembling. If she was wrong, we were getting closer to the lockout. Do it, I said. She tapped the numbers. 212000. The lock icon at the top of the screen clicked open. The home screen appeared. We all let out a breath we didn't know we were holding. It was sick. It was twisted. His passcode was the exact amount of money he was using to enslave my family. That was the mind of Hunter Sterling. Jaron immediately plugged the phone into his laptop. I am mirroring the drive, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. If they wipe it remotely, we will still have the data. While the progress bar crawled across the screen, I picked up the phone. I opened the messaging app. The unread count was staggering, but one thread was pinned to the top. It was titled, The Inner Circle. The participants were Hunter Richard Sterling and a number saved only as the chemist. I opened it. I wish I hadn't. The messages from the last 24 hours were a stream of hate that made my stomach turn. Hunter. The old man actually brought a dog. Can you believe it? I'm going to put a bullet in that mutt's head when we evict them. Richard Focus Hunter. Did you get the signature Hunter Numb? The girl got away. But it doesn't matter. The judge gave us the guardianship. We own him now. He can't even buy a loaf of bread without my permission. There was a photo attached. It was a picture of me taken from a distance with a telephoto lens looking defeated on my porch. Richard. Look at him. The king of the cowboys. He looks like a stray dog. Tomorrow we crush him. Zola turned away. She couldn't look. But I kept scrolling. I needed to see the depth of their depravity. And then I found it. It was a document sent 3 days ago. A PDF titled Project Hades, Site Assessment. I tapped it open. This is it, I said. I expected to see blueprints for a luxury resort. I expected to see a golf course or a strip mall. I expected greed. But what I saw was genocide. The document was a geological survey of my land, but it wasn't focused on the surface. It was focused on the deep aquifers and the abandoned salt caverns beneath the limestone. I read the executive summary out loud. Site 500 offers optimal conditions for Class 1 hazardous waste injection. The geological stability allows for the storage of 50,000 gallons of industrial byproduct daily. The proximity to the water table is a concern but can be mitigated by... I stopped reading. Mitigated. They weren't just mining lithium. That was the cover story. The lithium was the bait. The real money was in what they were going to put back into the ground. They were turning my ranch into a toxic toilet. They planned to dump chemical runoff here. I said, my voice shaking with rage. From their plastics factory in Houston. It costs them millions to dispose of it legally. So they want to bury it under my cows. Jaron looked up from the computer screen. His one good eye was wide with horror. Cornel, he said quietly. If they inject waste into those caverns, it won't stay there. The limestone is porous. It will leach into the aquifer. He pulled up a map on the screen. Look, he pointed. This aquifer doesn't just feed your well. It feeds the town's municipal water supply. It feeds the elementary school down the road. It feeds the crops for 50 miles. I stared at the map. The blue lines of the water table looked like veins, and the Sterlings were planning to inject poison directly into the heart. This isn't property fraud, I whispered. This is domestic terrorism. If they do this, Jaron said, within 5 years the cancer rates in this county will skyrocket. Children will get sick. The land will be dead for 1,000 years. I looked at Zola. She was crying, but these were not tears of fear. They were tears of shock. He told me he wanted to build a legacy, she said. He told me he wanted to build a home for us. He wanted to build a graveyard, I said. Jaron's computer beeped. Download complete. We have it, Jaron said. We have the emails. We have the geological reports. We have the bribes paid to the zoning commissioner to look the other way. We have everything. Suddenly, the front yard erupted in light. Blue and red strobes flashed through the curtains, illuminating the dark kitchen in a chaotic rhythm. Siren wails cut through the silence. Not one car. 3 cars. They are here, I said. I walked to the window. Sheriff Miller was stepping out of his cruiser. He had his hand on his gun. 2 deputies were flanking him. Hunter Sterling was in the passenger seat of the lead car, pointing at the house. Open up, Miller shouted through a bullhorn. This is the sheriff's department. They tracked the phone, Jaron said. They used the GPS. I looked at Jaren. He was holding the phone in one hand and a flash drive in the other. Hide the drive, I ordered. Jaren slipped the small silver stick into the hollow heel of his boot. It was an old smuggler's trick he had learned in the 70s. What about the phone? Zola asked. Give it to me, I said. Jaren handed me the phone. I walked to the front door. The pounding was getting louder. Open the door, Cornel Miller yelled. We know you are in there. We know you have stolen property. I opened the door. The humid night air hit me. Sheriff Miller was standing on the bottom step. He looked angry. He looked like a man who was tired of doing the Sterling's dirty work, but was too deep in their pocket to stop. Step aside, Miller, Hunter shouted from the car. Arrest him. He stole my phone. He set his dog on me. Miller looked at me. Where is it, Cornel? Where is what? I asked calmly. The phone, Miller said. The GPS says it is in this kitchen. Hand it over. That is grand larceny, Cornel. That is a felony. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the phone. Is this what you want? I asked. Hunter ran up the steps. He snatched the phone from my hand. He looked at it frantically. He checked the screen. He saw it was unlocked. You hacked it, he screamed. You looked at my files. He turned to Miller. Arrest him. He violated my privacy. He stole my proprietary data. Miller looked at me. Cornel Hayes, you are under arrest for theft and... Wait, I said. I pointed at the phone in Hunter's hand. I didn't steal it, I said. You dropped it. On my property. When you were trespassing and assaulting my daughter? I pointed to the bruises on Zola's arm visible under the porch light. And as for looking at it, I continued. Since when is it a crime to look at a phone that has no passcode? Hunter froze. It had a passcode, he yelled. A 6-digit code. Really? I asked. Then how did I open it? Maybe you forgot to lock it. Hunter, maybe you were too busy running from a dog to remember your security protocols. Hunter looked at the phone. He realized the trap. If he admitted I guessed the code, he admitted nothing. If he claimed it was hacked, he had to prove I had the technical skill which his own lawyers had just argued in court I didn't have because I was senile. He turned red. Miller, he said. Confiscate all electronics in the house. Computers, tablets, everything. I want this place scrubbed. Miller sighed. He looked at me apologetically, then signaled his deputies. Tear it apart, boys. The deputies pushed past me. They stormed the kitchen. They grabbed Jaren's laptop. They grabbed Zola's old iPad. They ransacked the drawers. Jaren stood in the corner, his arms crossed, looking bored. He tapped the heel of his boot on the floorboards. Tap, tap, tap. The drive was safe. They took everything. They stripped the house of every microchip they could find. They marched out with bags of evidence. Hunter stood by the car, clutching his phone to his chest. He looked at me with pure hatred. You saw it, he hissed. You saw the plans. I looked him dead in the eye. I saw enough. I said, it doesn't matter. Hunter laughed. It was a nervous, manic laugh. Who are you going to tell? You are a crazy old man under guardianship. No one will believe you. And now I have my phone back. You have no proof. He got into the car. Miller looked at me one last time. Stay inside, Cornel, he warned. Don't make me come back with cuffs. The convoy drove away. The lights faded. The silence returned. We stood in the ravaged kitchen. My laptop was gone. The phone was gone. To the outside world we were disarmed. Jaren sat down on a chair. He reached down and pulled off his boot. He shook it. The silver flash drive fell onto the table with a clink. It sounded louder than the sirens. They got the hardware, Jaren said, picking up the drive. But we got the soul. I picked up the drive. It was small, cold, and heavy. Hunter was right about one thing, I said. No one will believe a crazy old man. I looked at Zola. But they might believe the EPA. Tomorrow we weren't going to court. We were going to war. And this time we had the nuclear codes. The silence in the house was heavy. It was the silence of defeat. Or at least, that is what I wanted the deputy outside to think. I looked at Zola. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty spot where her laptop used to be. She looked hopeless. I walked to the hallway closet. I reached into the back behind the winter coats and pulled out my old dress uniform jacket. It smelled of mothballs and memories. Inside the inner pocket there was a silver pen. It looked like an ordinary Parker pen, but it was not. It was a souvenir from a joint operation in Berlin back in the 80s. The ink in this pen was special. It was designed for temporary field notes. It was designed to vanish without a trace after 4 hours of exposure to oxygen. I put the pen in my shirt pocket. I buttoned my flannel shirt over it. I hunched my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I shuffled my feet. I looked in the mirror. Cornel Hayes, the Marine, was gone. In his place stood a broken, confused 72-year-old man. "I am ready," I whispered to Zola. "Dad," she said. Her voice was trembling. "Are you sure about this? If that ink doesn't work, if they catch you. If I don't do this, Zola, we lose anyway," I said. "Trust the plan." I walked out the front door. I shuffled down the driveway, dragging my feet in the gravel. I approached the deputy's car. He rolled down the window, looking annoyed. "I need to make a call," I said. My voice was shaky and weak. "I need to call my guardian." The deputy smirked. He handed me his phone. "Make it quick, old man." I dialed Richard Sterling's number. I knew it by heart. "Sterling." He answered on the first ring. "Richard." I wheezed into the phone. "It is Cornel." There was a pause. I could hear the smile in his voice. "Cornel, to what do I owe this pleasure? Ready to cause more trouble?" "No," I said. "No more trouble." "I am tired, Richard. I am so tired. The heat, the hunger. Zola is crying. I can't take it anymore." "Good," Richard said. "That means the system is working." "I want to end it," I said. "I want to sign. Just promise me you will let us stay in the house for a month. Just until we find a place." Richard laughed. It was a victorious sound. "Be at my office in an hour, Cornel, and bring the girl. I want her to witness her father's surrender." I handed the phone back to the deputy. He looked at me with pity. "Rough day, huh?" he said. "You have no idea," I muttered. Zola and I drove my truck to the Sterling headquarters. It was a glass tower in the center of town, a monument to greed built on the backs of people like me. We rode the elevator to the top floor. My hand shook as I pressed the button. Zola held my arm. She was shaking too, but she wasn't acting. The elevator doors opened. The reception area was cool and smelled of expensive leather. Richard was waiting for us in the conference room. Hunter was there too. He was wearing a fresh bandage on his arm where Gunnar had bitten him. He looked at me with pure venom. "Well, well," Richard said, spreading his arms. "The prodigal rancher returns." I walked into the room with my head down. I gripped my hat in my hands, twisting the brim. "Just give me the papers," I mumbled. "I just want to go home." "Sit down, Cornel," Richard commanded. I sat. The chair was too soft. It swallowed me. Hunter stood behind me. I could feel his heat. I could feel his desire to hurt me. "Here is the agreement." Richard slid a thick stack of papers across the mahogany table. "It is generous, Cornel. We are assuming the debt. We are giving you a stipend of $1,000 to help you move, and in exchange you transfer the deed, the mineral rights, and the water rights to Sterling Industries." $1,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover the moving truck. I reached for the papers. My hand trembled violently. I dropped them. Hunter snorted. "Look at him, Dad. He is falling apart. He is pathetic." I picked up the papers. I pretended to read them, but my eyes were unfocused. "Where do I sign?" I asked. "Page 4, page 10, and the final signature on page 20, Richard said. He held out his gold pen. "Here, use this." I reached for his pen, then I pulled my hand back. I patted my chest pocket. "I brought my own," I said softly. "It is the only thing I have left from the service. I want to sign away my life with my own pen." Richard rolled his eyes. "Fine. Whatever makes you happy. Just sign the damn thing." I pulled out the silver Parker pen. I clicked it. I leaned over the document. I felt the eyes of the enemy on me. They were watching a man die. They were watching a legacy crumble. I signed the first page, Cornel Hayes. The blue ink flowed smoothly onto the white paper. I signed the second page. My hand shook so much the signature looked jagged. Good. That fit the narrative. I signed the final page, the deed transfer. I pressed down hard. I wanted the impression to be deep. I wanted them to see the ink and believe it was permanent. "There," I said. I dropped the pen on the table. It rolled toward Richard. He picked up the document. He blew on the ink. Not dead. He smiled. "A shark finding blood in the water. Done," he said. He looked at Hunter. "Call the sheriff. Tell him to lift the siege. But tell him to keep the eviction notice for tomorrow morning. I want them out by noon." "You said we had a month," Zola cried. I lied. Richard said, cold as ice. "You have 24 hours. Get off my property." I stood up slowly. I leaned on the table for support. "You are a cruel man, Richard," I whispered. "I am a businessman, Cornel," Richard replied. "And business has no room for sentiment. Now get out." Hunter stepped forward. He got right in my face. "And leave the dog," he sneered. "I have plans for him." I looked at Hunter. I let a flash of the old Cornel show in my eyes, just for a second. "You come near my dog again, boy, and you will lose more than a phone." Hunter flinched. He stepped back. "Get them out of here," Richard shouted. We walked to the elevator. The doors closed on the sight of Richard Sterling holding the papers up to the light, admiring his prize. He was holding a ghost. In 4 hours, that signature would be gone. The paper would be blank, and without a signature, the contract was void. But by the time he realized it, the Trojan horse would already be inside the gates. We walked out of the building. The sun was setting, the air was hot and thick. As soon as we stepped onto the sidewalk, my posture changed. I straightened my back, I rolled my shoulders. The shuffle was gone, the tremors were gone. The confused old man evaporated and the Marine returned. Zola looked at me. She wiped her eyes. "Did it work?" she asked. I checked my watch. "The clock is ticking," I said. "We have 4 hours before that paper is blank. That gives us 4 hours to get to the only people who can stop this permanently." I looked at the silver pen in my pocket. It was a simple tool, but it had just bought us the most valuable commodity in war, time. Behind us in the penthouse office, I could imagine Richard pouring champagne. I could imagine them toasting to their victory. They were celebrating the theft of $50 million. They were celebrating the destruction of my family. "Let them drink," I said to Zola. "Let them get drunk on their own arrogance." We got into the truck. "Where are we going, Dad?" Zola asked. Home number 1 said, starting the engine. "We are going to the Federal Building in Houston. We have a flash drive to deliver, and we have a story to tell." I pulled out into traffic. I looked in the rearview mirror at the Sterling Tower. It gleamed in the twilight. It looked invincible. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that the foundation of that tower was built on a signature that was currently fading into thin air. The Trojan horse was in. Now it was time to light the match. The sun had not yet cleared the horizon when the first diesel engine roared to life. It was a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards of the ranch house. I was already awake. I had not slept. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, watching the darkness retreat. Then came the second engine. Then the third. The morning air was filled with the smell of unburnt fuel and the screech of metal tracks on gravel. Richard Sterling had promised us until noon. He had looked me in the eye and given his word that we had until midday to vacate the property. But Richard Sterling was a man who believed that contracts were for poor people and rules were for fools. He had sent the demolition crew at dawn. I heard Zola run down the stairs. She burst into the living room. She was wearing her pajamas and her hair was a mess. "Dad!" she screamed. "Dad, they are here!" She ran to the window. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she sobbed. "They are not waiting. They are destroying it." I looked out. 3 massive yellow bulldozers were lining up at the edge of the south pasture. They looked like prehistoric beasts hungry for destruction. Behind them was a black SUV. I knew who was inside. The lead bulldozer revved its engine. A cloud of black smoke shot into the pink sky. The driver lifted the massive steel blade. He drove forward. The first thing to go was the fence. The wooden posts that my father had set in concrete 50 years ago snapped like toothpicks. The barbed wire sang as it tore apart, coiling like a striking snake. Then they turned toward the garden. Edda's garden. "No!" Zola cried. She pounded on the glass. "Not the roses. Please, not the roses." My wife had planted those heritage roses 30 years ago. They were her pride and joy. They were the only living thing I had left of her besides Zola. The bulldozer didn't hesitate. It plowed through the flower beds, turning the rich, dark soil and the blooming bushes into a churned mess of brown and green. The trellis shattered. The stone bench where we used to sit and watch the sunset was crushed into powder. Zola turned to me. Her face was red with anger and betrayal. Do something, she yelled. Stop them. I stayed in my chair. I took a sip of my tea. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. I can't, I said calmly. I signed the papers, Zola. It is their land now. They can do what they want. Zola stared at me. She looked like I had slapped her. You coward, she whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. You just gave up. You let them win. You signed that paper, and now you are sitting here drinking tea while they erase Mom from the face of the earth. She didn't know about the disappearing ink. She didn't know about the flash drive we had delivered to the field office in Houston last night. I had to keep her in the dark. Her reaction had to be real. If she looked confident, Hunter would get suspicious. I am sorry, Zola, I said. I did what I had to do. I hate you, she said. She didn't scream it. She said it with a quiet finality that hurt more than any shout. I hate you for being weak. She ran out the back door toward the barn, trying to salvage what she could before the machines got there. I watched the bulldozer finish with the garden. It turned its tracks, tearing up the lawn. It was heading for the oak tree, the hanging tree, the tree that marked the center of the Hayes legacy. Hunter Sterling got out of the SUV. He was wearing sunglasses even though the sun was barely up. He held a coffee cup in one hand and pointed at the tree with the other. He was giving the order to kill it. I set my teacup down on the saucer. It made a sharp clink in the silent house. It was time. I reached under the cushion of my armchair. I pulled out a satellite phone. It was an old brick of a device I kept for hurricane season when the towers went down. I had charged it last night. I extended the antenna. I dialed a number that was not in the phone book. It was a direct line to the Special Investigations Unit of the EPA. A number Jaron had given me. It rang once, twice. Agent Miller. A crisp voice answered. This is Cornel Hayes, I said. I am at the ranch, the site of Project Hades. Mr. Hayes, the agent said, we received the drive you dropped off. We have been reviewing the data all night. And, I asked. I looked out the window. The bulldozer was 10 feet from the oak tree. The blade was lowered. And it is worse than we thought, the agent said. The chemical signatures in those emails match the illegal dumping patterns we have been tracking for a decade. We have enough for a raid. When? I asked. We are 2 minutes out, the agent said. Do not engage the targets. Let us handle it. 2 minutes. I hung up the phone. I slid it back under the cushion. 2 minutes was a long time when a 40-ton machine was bearing down on your home. I stood up. I buttoned my flannel shirt. I walked to the front door and opened it. The noise was deafening. The ground was shaking so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The bulldozer at the tree was revving its engine, preparing to push. Hunter saw me. He smiled. He waved his hand, mocking me. He cupped his ear, pretending he couldn't hear the destruction. I walked out onto the porch. I stood on the top step. I crossed my arms. Hunter signaled the driver to stop. He wanted to savor this. He walked over to the porch. He had to shout to be heard over the idle rumble of the engines. Good morning, Cornel, he yelled. Did we wake you? You are early, I said. My voice was steady. I couldn't wait. Hunter laughed. I wanted to get a head start on the renovations. That tree was an eyesore anyway. Blocking the view of the future injection site, he looked at the churned-up roses. Shame about the flowers, he said. But progress is messy, right? I looked at my watch. 1 minute left. You shouldn't have done that, Hunter, I said. You should have waited until noon. Why? Hunter sneered. You signed the deed. It is my dirt. I can burn it if I want to. I looked at him. I looked at the paper contract sticking out of his back pocket. Check the signature, I said. What? He frowned. Check the paperwork, Hunter, I said louder. Take a look at the deed you are so proud of. Hunter looked confused. He pulled the folded document from his pocket. He unfolded it. He looked at the bottom of the page. His face went pale. He squinted. He rubbed the paper with his thumb. Where is it? He muttered. He flipped the page. He flipped back. It is gone, he shouted. The ink is gone. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with panic. What did you do? He screamed. What kind of trick is this? It is a special kind of ink, Hunter, I said. It is called invisible ink. We used it in the Cold War for messages we didn't want the enemy to keep. You signed a legal document with disappearing ink. He shrieked. That is fraud. That is illegal. I took a step down. No, I said. That is a null contract. Without a signature, you don't own this land. You are trespassing. And you just destroyed my wife's garden. Hunter turned to the bulldozer driver. Push it! He screamed. Push the house down. I don't care about the paper. Destroy it all. The driver looked hesitant. Do it, Hunter yelled. I will pay you triple. Flatten the house with him inside. The driver engaged the gear. Black smoke poured from the stack. The massive machine lurched forward. The blade scraped the bottom step of the porch. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. 10 seconds. Hunter was laughing maniacally. He was losing his mind. He wanted to bury his mistake under a pile of rubble. 5 seconds. The blade hit the wood of the porch. The timbers groaned and splintered. 3 seconds. Suddenly, a sound cut through the roar of the diesel engines. It was a sound I had been waiting for all morning, the thwup 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 of rotor blades. I looked up. Rising over the tree line like avenging angels were 3 black helicopters. On the side of each one, in bold white letters, were 3 letters, FBI. They swooped down low, kicking up a storm of dust that blinded Hunter. At the same time, the main gate exploded inward. A black armored personnel carrier smashed through the wood, followed by a convoy of black SUVs. Sirens wailed from every direction. Hunter froze. He looked at the helicopters. He looked at the trucks. He looked at me. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in days. I told you, Hunter, I said. You should have waited until noon. Agents in tactical gear poured out of the vehicles. They swarmed the property. Dorsal agents. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Kill the engines. Step away from the vehicles. Put your hands in the air. The bulldozer driver killed the engine instantly. He jumped out of the cab and laid face down in the dirt. He wasn't getting paid enough to fight the feds. Hunter stood alone in the driveway. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches. I walked down the steps. I walked right past him. I walked toward the garden where Zola was standing. She was staring at the helicopters with her mouth open. Dad, she stammered. What is happening? I put my arm around her. Justice Zola, I said. This is what justice looks like. I turned her around so she could watch. 2 agents grabbed Hunter. They didn't ask him nicely. They slammed him against the hood of his own SUV. They cuffed his hands behind his back. Hunter was screaming. Do you know who my father is? This is a mistake. I want my lawyer. An agent walked up to me. He was wearing a windbreaker that said, EPA, Criminal Division. Mr. Hayes, he said, I am Agent Miller. Thank you for the tip. Is it enough? I asked. Miller looked at the bulldozers. He looked at the soil samples his team was already taking. We found the injection wells hidden in the South Ridge, he said. And the digital trail you provided connects the Sterling chemical plant directly to this site. It is a slam dunk, Mr. Hayes. Conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act, illegal dumping, racketeering. He looked at Hunter being dragged into a van. They are going away for a long time. I nodded. One more thing, Agent, I said. Yes, sir. That man. I pointed at Hunter. He stole my horses, and he killed one of them. Miller made a note. We will add animal cruelty and grand larceny to the indictment. We will find your horses, Mr. Hayes. I watched as the convoy of justice secured my land. The bulldozers that were meant to destroy me were now evidence. The man who wanted to enslave me was in chains. I looked at Zola. I am sorry I tricked you, I said. I had to make sure they believed I had given up. She hugged me. She hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. You are not weak, Dad, she whispered. You are the strongest man I know. I looked at the ruined garden. The roses were gone, but the roots were still there. They were deep in the Texas soil, and like us, they would grow back. The battle for the ranch was over, but the war wasn't finished yet. There was still one head of the snake left to cut off. Richard Sterling was sitting in his glass tower waiting for a victory call. I decided I would deliver the news myself. The dust from the black helicopters hadn't even settled when the second wave hit. This wasn't a tactical strike. It was a bureaucratic tsunami. A convoy of black SUVs with federal government plates roared through the shattered front gate flanking the armored personnel carriers. Men and women in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI, EPA, and DOJ swarmed the property like ants on a spilled picnic. They didn't have guns drawn. They had clipboards, cameras, and yellow crime scene tape. They weren't here to arrest a person. They were here to arrest the land itself. I stood on the porch with Zola watching the dismantling of the Sterling Empire. An agent walked up to the lead bulldozer, climbed the ladder, and slapped a bright orange sticker on the windshield. Seized evidence. He did the same to the second bulldozer, then the third. The massive yellow machines which just minutes ago had been instruments of terror were now just heavy metal corpses in a federal graveyard. The site foreman, a man who had sneered at me earlier, was now frantically trying to explain himself to a stern-looking woman from the Department of Justice. I saw him pointing at his phone, likely trying to call Richard Sterling, but Richard wasn't answering. Or if he was hearing the worst news of his life. Agent Miller approached me. He looked tired, but satisfied. "We have issued a federal stop work order, Mr. Hayes. This entire property is now a protected crime scene. No one digs a hole, no one moves a rock, and certainly no one injects chemicals into the ground until our investigation is complete. And given what we found in those emails, that investigation is going to take about 20 years. I looked at the churned earth of Etta's garden. It was a mess, but it was my mess. The violation had stopped. The rape of the land was over. Zola squeezed my hand. Her grip was strong. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a steely resolve. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a witness. Suddenly, a sleek silver Mercedes sped through the chaos, dodging the parked federal vehicles. It screeched to a halt near the porch. Richard Sterling burst out of the driver's seat. He wasn't wearing his usual pristine suit. His tie was undone, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had been woken up by a nightmare. "What is the meaning of this?" he screamed, marching toward Agent Miller. "I am Richard Sterling. This is private property. Get your vehicles off my land." He didn't see me at first. He only saw the uniforms. He only saw the threat to his money. Agent Miller stepped forward, calm and immovable as a mountain. "Mr. Sterling, I strongly advise you to lower your voice. I own this land," Richard bellowed, waving a hand at the devastation. "I have the deed, I have the transfer papers signed this morning. This is harassment." I cleared my throat. It was a quiet sound, but it cut through Richard's hysteria like a knife. "Hello, Richard," I said. He spun around. He looked at me standing on the porch of the house he thought he had conquered. His eyes narrowed into slits of pure hatred. "You," he hissed. "You called them. You senile old traitor." "I didn't call them, Richard," I said, walking slowly down the steps. "I just invited them to the party. You were the one who set the table." Richard sneered. "It doesn't matter. None of this matters. I have your signature. I have the contract. You signed it in front of witnesses. The land is mine. The EPA can fine me, but they can't take the title. I will tie this up in court for a decade. But you are evicted today." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded document, the one I had signed with the silver pen. "I am going to the courthouse right now to file this." He spat. "And when I come back, I'm bringing the sheriff to drag you out by your hair." I smiled. It was the smile of a man who had already seen the end of the movie. "I will see you in court, Richard," I said. "In fact, why don't we go together? I think Judge Holloway might want to see that document too." Richard laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You want to go back to court? To the judge who works for me? Fine, let's go. I'll enjoy watching him throw you in a cell for fraud." He didn't know. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, he didn't check the paper. He just shoved it back into his pocket, got in his car, and peeled away. I looked at Agent Miller. "Can I get a ride?" I asked. Miller smiled. "Get in the back, Mr. Hayes. We'll run lights and sirens." The courtroom was packed. Word had spread fast. The arrest of Hunter Sterling and the raid on the ranch had set the town on fire. Gossip traveled faster than electricity in a blackout. When I walked in flanked by Zola and Jaron, the murmurs stopped. People looked at me differently. I wasn't the crazy old man anymore. I was the man who had brought the feds to town. Judge Holloway sat on the bench looking nervous. He had heard the news. He knew the wind was changing, but he was still a Sterling man. Richard stood at the plaintiff's table trying to look composed, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Holloway banged his gavel. "We are here on an emergency motion filed by Mr. Hayes' counsel to dissolve the temporary guardianship and vacate the eviction order." Richard's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Mr. Hayes is incompetent. He signed a voluntary transfer of the deed this very morning. The property belongs to Sterling Industries. We have the document right here. Show it to the court," Judge Holloway said, eager to get this over with. Richard stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He held the document up like a trophy. "Here it is, Your Honor, signed by Cornel Hayes." transferring all rights, title, and interest to me. He handed the document to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Judge Holloway put on his glasses. He opened the folder. He looked at the first page. He frowned. He turned the page. He frowned deeper. He flipped to the last page. He took off his glasses. He wiped them. He put them back on. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice confused. "Is this a joke?" "What?" Richard asked, annoyed. The judge turned the document around so the court could see. It was blank. There were typed paragraphs, sure, but the signature lines empty. The initials on each page, gone. The sprawling signature I had made with such dramatic flair just 4 hours ago had vanished completely. The paper was as pristine as the day it came out of the printer. Richard's face went white. He ran to the bench. He grabbed the paper. "That is impossible," he shrieked. "He signed it. I saw him sign it. Hunter saw him sign it." Jaron stood up. He walked over to the exhibit table. He picked up a small evidence bag. Inside was the silver Parker pen. "Your Honor," Jaron said, his voice smooth as silk, "my client did sign a piece of paper, but he used a pen containing high volatile disappearing ink, a novelty item often used by spies or magicians. It vanishes within 4 hours of exposure to air." He looked at Richard. "Since there is no signature, there is no contract. And since there is no contract, Mr. Sterling has no claim to the land." Richard looked at the blank page. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Fraud," he screamed. "This is fraud." "He tricked me." Jaron smiled. "Is it fraud, Richard? Or is it proof of competency? You claimed my client was senile. You claimed he didn't know what he was doing. But it seems he was smart enough to outwit you. A senile man couldn't pull off a sting operation like this." The courtroom erupted. People were laughing. Richard Sterling, the man who owned the town, had been played by an old rancher with a magic pen. Judge Holloway looked at Richard. He looked at the blank paper. He knew the game was up. He couldn't enforce a blank contract. "The document is void," the judge ruled. "The transfer is invalid." "But I am still his guardian," Richard yelled, desperate. "I still control his assets. I can force him to sign a new one." Jaron held up a flash drive. "Not so fast," Jaron said. "Your Honor, before you rule on the guardianship, we would like to submit new evidence. This drive contains audio recordings recovered from Hunter Sterling's phone. Recordings of Richard Sterling conspiring to blackmail my client's daughter, coerce a signature, and admitting to the planned destruction of evidence." He plugged the drive into the court's AV system. Richard's voice boomed through the speakers. "Squeeze them until they starve. Cut the power. If the old man dies in the heat, it just speeds up the probate process." The courtroom gasped. It was the voice of a monster. Richard stood frozen. He looked at the jury box, then at the audience. He saw disgust in every pair of eyes. Judge Holloway banged his gavel. "Enough. I have heard enough." The judge looked at me. "The temporary guardianship is dissolved immediately. Mr. Hayes is restored to full legal capacity. All assets are to be unfrozen. And Mr. Sterling," he looked at Richard with genuine disdain, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of elder abuse and fraud." Richard slumped into his chair. He had lost the land. He had lost the control. But he still had one card to play. He looked at me with venomous eyes. "You think you won?" he whispered as I walked past him. "I still have the deposit. I have investors lined up. I will sue you for the development costs. I will bankrupt you with litigation. You can't build a ranch on a toxic waste site report. Your land is worthless now." I stopped. I turned to Zola. She handed me a leather-bound folder. It was old, dusty, and smelled of history. "I have one more thing, Your Honor," I said. Judge Holloway looked weary. "What is it now?" "Mr. Hayes, we found this in the county archives," I said. "While Mr. Sterling was busy trying to steal my future, I was looking into my past." I opened the folder. Inside was a yellowed map from 1920 and a deed signed by the state governor at the time. My grandfather didn't just buy a ranch. I said, my voice ringing clear and strong. He bought the land to protect what was already there. I held up the map. There was a red circle around the south ridge, the exact spot where the Sterlings planned to drill their injection wells. "This documents the location of the freedmen's burial ground," I said. "It is the final resting place of over 200 former slaves and their descendants, my ancestors." I looked at Richard. Under Texas Natural Resources Code, Chapter 191, and the Federal Historic Preservation Act, any land designated as a historic burial ground is protected from all commercial development, mining, or drilling. Forever. Richard's jaw dropped. "You can't drill through a graveyard, Richard," I said. "It is illegal. It is immoral. And now it is a matter of public record." I handed the document to the judge. "This designates the Hayes Ranch not just as a home, but as a state historical landmark." Jaron stepped forward. "And since Mr. Sterling has already accepted a non-refundable $20 million deposit from his foreign investors guaranteeing them drilling rights he can never deliver, I imagine he is going to have some very angry phone calls to answer this afternoon." Richard's face turned a color I had never seen before. It was the color of total financial ruin. $20 million. He had spent it. He had leveraged it. And now he had to pay it back with money he didn't have for land he couldn't touch. He stood up. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He clutched his chest. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found only enemies. The bailiff moved in not to help him, but to secure him. "Mr. Sterling, you are needed for questioning regarding the federal indictment." I watched as Richard Sterling was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, walking past the people he had looked down on for 40 years. He didn't look like a titan of industry anymore. He looked like a thief who had been caught by the lights. I turned to Zola. She was crying, but she was smiling too. "We did it," she whispered. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sun. The air smelled sweet. The storm was over. I took a deep breath. I was 72 years old. I had no money in my pocket, my barn was empty, and my garden was destroyed. But as I looked at my daughter and my lawyer, I felt richer than I had ever been in my life. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, the Hayes Ranch was truly safe. Not because of a fence or a gun, but because of the truth. And that, as they say, is something you can't buy. The fall of the House of Sterling did not happen in a day. It happened in an hour. It was a cascade failure, a structural collapse that started the moment Judge Holloway banged his gavel. When the news broke that the Hayes Ranch was a federally protected historical site, the $20 million deposit Richard Sterling had taken from his foreign investors didn't just disappear. It became a debt that was due immediately. I sat on my porch and watched the show. It was better than any movie. The first thing to arrive was not a car, but a sound. It was the sound of phones ringing in the Sterling mansion down the road. They rang so loud and so constant that I could almost hear them through the trees. The investors wanted their money back. They didn't care about historic graveyards or disappearing ink. They cared about their bottom line. And Richard Sterling didn't have the liquidity to pay them. Then came the trucks, tow trucks, flatbeds. The bank had moved faster than a striking cobra. Once the federal indictment was public, the bank triggered the default clauses on all of Richard's personal loans. I watched as the repo men hooked up the silver Mercedes. I watched as they loaded Hunter's sports car. They even took the golf cart. It was a stripping of assets so brutal and efficient it was almost admirable. But the banks were the polite ones. The real trouble arrived in a black sedan with tinted windows. 2 men in cheap suits got out. They didn't knock on the door. They kicked it. These were not bankers. These were the men Hunter Sterling owed money to. Gambling debts, crypto losses, debts he had promised to pay once he secured the deed to my ranch. Now that the deed was gone, his protection was gone. I saw Hunter run out the back door of the mansion. He looked like a frightened rabbit. He was trying to climb the fence, the same fence he had mocked me for mending. The men caught him easily. They didn't hit him. Not yet. They just talked to him. They leaned in close and whispered things that made Hunter drop to his knees in the dirt. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the language. It was the language of broken fingers and kneecaps. They were giving him a deadline he couldn't meet. Hunter was reaping the harvest he had sown. He had tried to steal my land to pay for his sins. Now his sins had come to collect and he had no land to hide behind. The financial empire they had built on lies and leverage was evaporating. Stocks plummeted. Partners resigned. The country club revoked their membership by email. In the span of an afternoon, the Sterlings went from being the royalty of the county to being untouchables. It was a domino effect of pure destruction. And the first domino had been pushed by a 72-year-old rancher with a silver pen. The financial ruin was just the beginning. The real ugliness happened when the lights went out. The power company, the same one Richard had bribed to cut my electricity, had cut his off due to non-payment and federal seizure orders. The mansion was dark, but the voices coming from inside were loud enough to light up the night. I walked down to the property line. I stood by the fence. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to witness the end of the dynasty. The shouting match between Richard and Patricia was primal. It wasn't an argument, it was an evisceration. "You stupid old fool," I heard Patricia scream. Her voice was shrill, stripping away the veneer of the elegant society wife. "You told me it was a sure thing. You told me the deposit was ours to spend. I bought the villa in France because you said the deal was done. Now they are going to seize my jewelry. They are going to take my furs." "Shut up, Patricia," Richard roared back. "You spent money like a drunken sailor. If you hadn't drained the emergency fund for your plastic surgery, we might have had a cushion to fight this." "Don't you blame me," Patricia yelled. "Blame your idiot son. Blame the boy you spoiled rotten." I saw a lamp fly past a window and shatter against a wall. Hunter's voice joined the fray. He sounded desperate, whining like a child. "It's not my fault," Hunter cried. "The old man tricked me. He hacked my phone." "You lost the phone, you moron," Richard bellowed. "You dropped the keys to the kingdom in the dirt because you were scared of a dog. You are weak, Hunter. You have always been weak. I should have let you go to jail for the DUI 3 years ago. I should have cut you off then. Instead, I spent millions covering up your mistakes. And this is how you repay me, by destroying my legacy." I heard the sound of a slap, sharp and violent. Then another. They were tearing each other apart. The family that had looked so perfect in the society pages, so united in their greed, was nothing but a nest of vipers biting their own tails. There was no loyalty there. There was no love. There was only shared ambition, and without the ambition, there was only hate. Hunter ran out onto the terrace. He was holding his face. "I hate you." He screamed at his father. "I hope you die in prison. I hope you die in the gutter." Richard screamed back, "You are no son of mine. You are a parasite." I stood in the darkness, listening to them destroy each other. It was tragic. It was pathetic. But it was also necessary. They had built their house on the suffering of others. It was only fitting that it collapsed under the weight of their own venom. They had tried to break my family, but all they had done was reveal the cracks in their own. My daughter stood by me when I had nothing. Their son turned on them the moment the check bounced. That was the difference. That was why I won. The next morning, the silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops. I put on my best suit. It was old, but it was clean. I drove my truck to the First National Bank, the same bank that had denied me access to my own money just 48 hours ago. I walked into the conference room. Richard Sterling was there. He was sitting at the long mahogany table, flanked by 2 bankruptcy lawyers who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Richard looked 10 years older. His skin was gray, his eyes were hollow. He didn't even look up when I entered. Jaron walked in beside me. He was carrying a thick leather folder. "Gentlemen," Jaron said. Richard looked up, his eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here, Cornel?" he rasped. "I am in the middle of a liquidation meeting. Get out." "Actually," the bank manager spoke up. He looked nervous. He wouldn't meet Richard's eyes. "Mr. Hayes is a necessary party to this meeting." Richard looked confused. "Why?" "He is a plaintiff in a civil suit. He has no standing in my debt restructuring." Jaron placed the folder on the table. He opened it slowly. "You are correct, Richard," Jaron said. "You owe the bank $4 million in personal loans, loans secured by your shares in Sterling Industries. But as of this morning, the bank decided that your debt was toxic, too risky to hold, so they put it up for sale." Richard's face went pale. He looked at the bank manager. "You sold my debt," he whispered. "It is standard procedure." The manager stammered. "In cases of federal indictment and asset seizure—" "Who bought it?" Richard demanded. He slammed his hand on the table. "Who holds my paper?" I leaned forward. I rested my elbows on the mahogany. I looked Richard Sterling in the eye. "I did," I said. Richard laughed. It was a breathless, hysterical sound. You are broke. You can't afford a cup of coffee. You bought $4 million of debt. With what?" "I bought it for pennies on the dollar, Richard," I said. "Because no one else wanted it. No one wants to own a piece of a sinking ship. But I had some help. The Historical Society offered a very generous grant for the preservation of the Hayes Ranch." and the settlement from the EPA for being a whistleblower is substantial. I reinvested it. I tapped the folder. I own your loans, Richard. I own the mortgage on your house. I own the lien on your car. I own the shirt on your back. Richard slumped in his chair. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want you to feel it," I said. "I want you to feel the fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that a stranger holds your life in his hands." I stood up. "I am calling the note Richard, the full amount, due immediately." "You can't." He gasped. "I can't pay." "I know," I said. "That is the point." I walked to the door. I paused and looked back. "You have 24 hours to vacate the mansion. I hear the homeless shelter downtown has openings. It might be good for you. Build some character." I walked out of the bank. I walked out into the sunlight. I had not just defeated them, I had replaced them. I held the keys to their kingdom, and I was going to dismantle it brick by brick. Justice was not just about stopping the bad guys, it was about making sure they never had the power to hurt anyone ever again. And as I drove away, I saw the repo truck turning toward the Sterling mansion. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just nodded. The scales were balanced. The debt was paid. The sun was setting over the ridge, painting the Texas sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was a fitting backdrop for the end of a war. I was out by the main gate repairing the hinges that the federal convoy had smashed through yesterday. The physical work felt good. It grounded me. My hands were covered in grease and dust, and for the first time in weeks I felt like a rancher again instead of a defendant. Gunner was sleeping in the shade of the truck. His ear twitched before I heard anything. He let out a low growl that vibrated in his chest. I looked up. Walking down the dusty county road was a figure. He was limping. He was dragging one foot behind the other in a rhythm of pain. As he got closer, I realized who it was, but my mind struggled to accept it. It was Hunter Sterling, but it was not the Hunter Sterling who had sneered at me from the altar. It was not the Hunter Sterling who had ordered a bulldozer to crush my house. This man was a ghost. His designer clothes were torn and stained with mud. His face was a map of violence. One eye was swollen shut. His lip was split. He was clutching his ribs as if holding himself together. The loan sharks had found him, and they had left a message that no amount of money could erase. I put down my wrench. I wiped my hands on a rag. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't need one. This man was not a threat. He was a tragedy. Hunter reached the gate. He grabbed the bars to hold himself up. He looked at me through his good eye. There was no arrogance left in it, only fear and a desperate, pathetic hunger. "Cornel," he croaked. His voice was dry and cracked. "Please, I need water." I stared at him. I remembered the day he cut my water. I remembered Zola begging for a drink in the heat of the siege. "The hose is right there," I said, pointing to the spigot near the barn. He stumbled toward it. He fell to his knees in the mud and drank like a wild animal. He splashed water on his battered face. When he was done, he sat back in the dirt and looked up at the house. "Is she here?" he asked. "Go home, Hunter," I said. "I can't," he whispered. "They took the house. My father locked me out. He blames me for everything. He said if I come back, he will shoot me himself." He began to cry. It wasn't the manipulative crying he had done in the past. This was the sobbing of a child who had broken a toy he couldn't fix. "I need to see Zola," he said. "She loves me. She will understand. It was just business, Cornel. You know that. It was never personal. I just got in over my head. If I can talk to her. If I can explain." He started to stand up. I stepped in his path. "You are not going near her," I said. Hunter looked at me. A flash of his old delusion returned. "She is my fiancée," he said. "We have a connection. You are just a jealous old man keeping us apart. Zola." He screamed her name toward the house. "Zola, it's Hunter." "I'm hurt, baby. I need you." I prepared to grab him. I prepared to drag him off my land by his collar. But then the front door opened. I froze. I didn't want Zola to see this. I didn't want her to see the monster she had almost married looking so human and broken. I wanted to protect her one last time. "Dad!" Her voice rang out clear and strong. "Step away from him." I turned around. Zola was standing on the porch. She was wearing her work boots and jeans. Her hair was tied back. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like the queen of the ranch. And in her hands she held my old 12-gauge shotgun. Zola, I said, go inside. I handled this. No, Dad, she said, walking down the steps. You have fought enough battles for me. This one is mine. She walked across the yard. She didn't rush. Her steps were measured. The gravel crunched under her boots. She stopped 10 feet from Hunter. She raised the shotgun. The barrel didn't waver. It was pointed aim level at his chest. Zola. Hunter gasped. He tried to smile, but his split lip made it look like a grimace. Baby, look at me. Look what they did to me. I see you, Hunter, she said. Her voice was ice. They hurt me, Zola. They took everything. I have nowhere to go. I came back to you because you are the only good thing I ever had. I am sorry. I am so sorry about the wedding. About the horse. I was stressed. I was under pressure, but we can fix it. He took a step toward her. He reached out a hand. We can start over, he said. Just you and me. We can sell the story to the press. Romeo and Juliet. We can make millions, Zola. He was still doing it. Even now, bleeding in the dirt, he was calculating. He was scheming. He didn't see her as a person. He saw her as an asset, a lifeline. Zola cocked the shotgun. The sound was loud and mechanical. Stop, she commanded. Hunter stopped. He looked at the gun, then at her eyes. For the first time, he seemed to realize that the girl he had bullied was gone. You wouldn't shoot me, he said nervously. You love me. I love the man you pretended to be, Zola said. I love the mask, but the mask is off Hunter, and what is underneath makes me sick. She took a step forward. You didn't come back here because you love me, she said. You came back because you need a place to hide from your bookies. You came back because you think I am weak. You think I am still the girl who was afraid to speak up at dinner. You think you can cry a few tears and I will open the door. She shook her head. That girl died the night you killed my father's horse. Zola, Hunter pleaded. I can change. No, you can't, she said. You are a parasite. You feed on people until they are dry, and then you move on. Well, this well is dry, Hunter. There is nothing here for you. No money, no pity, and definitely no love. She gestured to the gate with the barrel of the gun. Get off my property, she said. Hunter looked at me. He looked for an ally. Cornel, tell her to put the gun down. I crossed my arms. She gave you an order, son. I suggest you follow it. Hunter looked back at Zola. He saw the resolve in her face. He realized he had lost her. Not to another man, not to her father, but to herself. He spat on the ground. Fine, he sneered. You are crazy anyway, just like your father. You deserve to rot in this dust bowl. He turned to limp away. He made it about 5 steps before the flashing lights appeared. This time it wasn't the feds. It was the county sheriff. But it wasn't Miller. Miller had been suspended pending an internal affairs investigation. It was a young deputy I didn't know. The cruiser pulled up, blocking the gate. The deputy stepped out with his hand on his holster. Hunter Sterling, he shouted. Hunter froze. He looked at the open fields to his right. He thought about running. Don't do it, the deputy warned. Hunter slumped. His shoulders collapsed. The last bit of fight drained out of him. You are under arrest, the deputy said, walking over and spinning him around. We have a warrant for grand larceny, animal cruelty, and 3 counts of fraud. The deputy cuffed him. Hunter winced as the metal clicked over his bruised wrists. As they shoved him into the back of the car, Hunter looked out the window at us. He looked at the house he had tried to destroy. He looked at the woman he had tried to own. And he looked at the old man he had underestimated. The car drove away, kicking up dust. Zola watched until the taillights disappeared. Then she lowered the shotgun. Her shoulders shook slightly. I walked over to her. I gently took the gun from her hands. I broke it open to check the chamber. It was empty. I knew it would be. I hadn't kept shells in the house since the seizures began. Zola knew it too. She had faced down a desperate, dangerous man with an empty gun. She hadn't needed bullets. She had needed courage. And she had found it in spades. You did good, Zola, I said. She looked at me. She didn't cry. She took a deep breath of the evening air. I am not afraid anymore, Dad, she said. I know. I smiled. We walked back to the porch. My phone rang in my pocket. It was Jaron. Cornel, Jaron said. His voice was light. Turn on the news. We went inside and turned on the small kitchen TV. The headline was bold and red. Sterling Empire crumbles. The reporter was standing in front of the glass tower downtown. Breaking news tonight. Richard Sterling, the prominent real estate developer, has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection just hours after being released on bail. Sources say his assets have been frozen by federal authorities and his creditors have initiated a hostile takeover of his remaining holdings. The Sterling family, once the wealthiest in the county, is reportedly facing total insolvency. The screen cut to a clip of Richard leaving the courthouse. He was shielding his face from the cameras. He looked old. He looked broken. Someone in the crowd threw a tomato. It hit his suit jacket. He didn't even stop to wipe it off. I turned off the TV. "It is done," I said. Zola sat down at the table where we had planned the wedding, the table where we had decoded the phone, the table where we had signed the fake contract. "It is finally quiet," she said. I went to the kitchen counter. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea. I set one in front of her. "The debt is paid," I said. "The land is safe, and the rats are in cages." I took a sip of my tea. It tasted sweet. Zola looked out the window at the darkened yard. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, we need to buy new horses," I laughed. It was a deep belly laugh that felt like it had been trapped inside me for 20 years. "Yes, we do, honey," I said. "And this time let's get some Mustangs. Something wild. Something that fights back." She smiled. It was a real smile. "Like us," she said. "Yeah," I said, raising my glass. "Just like us." The oak tree still stood. It was scarred. The bark on the south side was stripped away where the bulldozer blade had made contact. But the roots were deep and the heartwood was solid. Just like us. Sunday morning broke over the Hayes ranch with a clarity that stung the eyes. The dust from the federal raid had settled. The yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze like strange confetti. It was quiet. For the first time in a week, there were no engines, no sirens, and no shouting. There was only the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass and the distant call of a hawk circling a thermal. I walked with Zola up the gentle slope of the North Ridge. We were dressed in our Sunday best, not for church, but for a different kind of service. Zola carried a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the creek bed, bluebonnets and Indian paintbrushes. They were simple flowers, but to me they were more beautiful than the expensive white roses that had lined the aisle of her ruined wedding. We reached the small iron fence that marked the family plot. My grandfather was there. My parents were there. And Etta was there. The heavy granite headstone bore her name, Etta Mae Hayes, beloved wife and mother. I knelt in the dirt. I ran my hand over the cold stone. I thought about the secret she had kept. I thought about the loan papers she had signed in the dark, trying to save me from the burden of her illness. For a few days I had felt anger toward her. I had felt betrayed that she didn't trust me enough to share her fear. But looking at her name now, all the anger evaporated. It was replaced by a profound, aching love. She had fought for this land in her own way. She had taken on a predator to keep a roof over my head. She had been a soldier just as much as I was. "I am sorry I wasn't there, Etta," I whispered. "I am sorry you had to carry that weight alone." But I carried it the rest of the way. And I crossed the finish line. Zola knelt beside me. She placed the wildflowers against the stone. She didn't cry. She looked at her mother's name with a new understanding. She finally understood the kind of strength that ran in her blood. "We saved it, Mom," Zola said softly. "We saved every inch of it." We sat there for a long time. We watched the sun climb higher in the sky, illuminating the valley below. From this height, you couldn't see the broken fence or the churned-up garden. You could only see the green expanse of Texas rolling out to the horizon. It was a kingdom of grass and sky. I looked at Zola. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. She picked up a handful of dirt and let it sift through her fingers. "I am more than okay, Dad," she said. "I feel like I just woke up from a long nightmare. But I have a question." "Ask it," I said. "What do we do now?" She looked at the empty pastures where our herd used to be. "The horses are gone. The savings are gone. We stopped Sterling, but we are still broke." "We can't eat history, Dad, and we can't pay the electric bill with a plaque from the state." I smiled. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my knees. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a letter that had been delivered yesterday by a courier from Austin. You are right, I said. We can't eat history, but we can certainly live off it. I handed her the letter. Read it, I said. Zola opened the envelope. She unfolded the crisp stationery. It was from the Texas Historical Commission. She read it silently. Her eyes got wider with every line. Dad, she gasped. Is this real? It is real, I said. She read aloud. Due to the designation of the Hayes Ranch as a protected freedmen's burial site and a state archaeological landmark, the property is hereby granted a perpetual preservation easement. She looked up at me confused. Keep reading, I said. The part about the stipend. To ensure the maintenance and security of the site, the state awards an annual custodial grant of $150,000. Furthermore, per state tax code section 11.24, the property is 100% exempt from all property taxes effective immediately. Zola lowered the paper. Her mouth was open. No property taxes, she whispered. And a grant. Dad, this is more money than we made selling cattle in the last 5 years combined. I nodded. I looked out over the land. Sterling looked at this ground and saw a dump, I said. He saw a place to bury poison. He thought the only value was in destroying it. I pointed to the horizon. But he forgot that in America, history is the most valuable commodity of all. By proving this land is sacred, we didn't just save it. We made it untouchable, and we made it profitable. We don't have to work the land anymore, Zola. The land is working for us. Zola laughed. It was a sound of pure relief. She hugged me. She held onto the letter like it was a winning lottery ticket. You old fox, she said. You knew this the whole time. I didn't know. I admitted. I hoped. But when you are fighting a war, you use every weapon you have, even the ghosts of your ancestors. We walked back down the hill. The weight was gone from my shoulders. The ranch wasn't just a home anymore. It was a sanctuary. It was a fortress that no banker and no developer could ever breach again. We reached the barn. It was still empty. The silence of the missing horses still hung in the air like a shadow. We can't leave it empty, Zola said, looking at the dark stalls. A ranch needs a heartbeat. I walked to the tack room. I picked up 2 halters. Get the truck, I said. We have one more stop to make. We drove to the Bureau of Land Management holding facility 2 counties over. It wasn't a fancy auction house. There were no chandeliers and no champagne. It was dusty and it smelled of manure and sweat. The pens were full of wild mustangs, horses that had been rounded up from the open range. They were rough. They were scarred. They were untamed. They were perfect. We didn't buy quarter horses bred for show. We didn't buy docile riding ponies. I pointed to a large roan stallion in the back pen. He was kicking at the fence. He had a wild look in his eye. He looked like he wanted to fight the world. That one, I said. And that mare. Zola pointed to a chestnut with a white blaze. The one that won't let anyone near her. We bought them. We loaded them into the trailer. They kicked and screamed the whole way home. They were angry. They were scared. They were fighters. When we got back to the ranch, we didn't put them in the stalls. We opened the trailer gate right into the pasture. The stallion bolted out. He ran to the center of the field and reared up, pawing at the sky. The mare followed him, her mane flying in the wind. They ran. They ran until they were tired, and then they stopped and began to graze. They were home. A month later, Zola and I rode them for the first time. It had taken weeks of patience, weeks of soft words and slow movements, but we had earned their trust. We rode up to the highest point of the ridge as the sun began to set. The sky was a masterpiece of violet and gold. The air was cooling down. I looked at my daughter. She sat tall in the saddle. She wasn't the girl who had trembled at the altar. She wasn't the girl who had begged me to sign the papers. She was a woman who had looked down the barrel of a shotgun and found her courage. She looked at me and smiled. "It is beautiful, Dad," she said. "It is." I agreed. I looked out at the lights of the town flickering on in the distance. Somewhere down there, Richard Sterling was sitting in a rented apartment reading his bankruptcy filings. Somewhere down there, Hunter Sterling was sitting in a jail cell waiting for his trial. They had had everything: money, power, influence, and they had lost it all because they didn't understand one simple truth. You can't buy dignity, and you can't steal a man's soul if he refuses to give it to you. My name is Cornel Hayes. I am 72 years old. I have lived a long life. I have fought in wars overseas, and I have fought wars in my own backyard. People ask me what the secret is. They ask me how an old man with no resources took down a dynasty. I tell them it is simple. Family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about who stands next to you when the storm comes. It is about the people who will walk through the mud to find a dead horse. It is about the daughter who will pick up a pen to save her father, and the father who will burn down the world to save his daughter. I patted the neck of the Mustang. He was warm and strong beneath me. We turned our horses and headed back toward the house. The lights were on in the kitchen. It looked warm. It looked safe. This is my land. This is my legacy. And as long as there is breath in my body, it will never be for sale. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a hard road, but the view from the end is worth it. If you have ever had to stand up to a bully, or if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe that justice is worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe. There are a lot more stories hidden in these Texas hills, and I might just share another one with you soon. Until then, keep your fences mended and your powder dry. Cornel Hayes, signing off. I learned that the strongest fences on a ranch are not made of barbed wire. They are made of integrity. The Sterlings had money lawyers and political influence, but they lacked the one thing that truly matters, a moral compass. They thought they could bury me because I was old, but they forgot that roots grow deep in the dark. True wealth isn't what you have in the bank. It is being able to look at yourself in the mirror every morning without flinching. Justice might be slow, and sometimes it needs a little push from a stubborn old Marine, but it always finds its way home to those who refuse to kneel. If this story reminded you to stand tall against the giants in your life, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.